get ready to RPG!
RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG!
Hello. Greetings. Welcome, my friends, to a Saturday night stream, unexpectedly. Yeah, I did nothing, like, all day. I went ice skating, and which was fun. And I started to sort through my clothes because I'm planning on donating a bunch of them because I want to move, obviously, at some point. But also we have painters coming in, so I've been trying to, like, clean up, closets and stuff like that. Anyways, so I basically did nothing all day. Social. I went, I ice skated, I sorted clothes. And yes, I have a lot of clothes because, I was big and then small and then big again and then small and then big again. And then, I've gradually been losing weight. And, there's a lot of clothes through the cycle. So I'm just donating a bunch of it. Anyways, I didn't do anything social today. I didn't do anything fun today. I mean, I guess ice skating is fun. I don't think I actually talked to anybody today. I mean, there may have been like the briefest curt nod to like, of like one please for the, that I talked to enter into the ice rink. But it was pretty low social day. So I was feeling a little, hey, my friends. And so I was just going to sit down tonight. Now that it's the evening. And I was going to take a look at the Torchbearer Scholar's Guide, which is part of Torchbearer 2nd edition. It's part of the 2-box kit. And it's not a first look because I know what kind of the game is, but I actually haven't read like this yet per se, because the original Torchbearer 1st edition was just one book. And you can see that the book itself is not super thick. Obviously, it's a bigger form factor, right? But this was it. This was the whole game. There was no other rules for it. And when they released 2nd edition, they split it. They split it into basically a player's handbook, which is called the Dungeoneer's Handbook, and then they split it into a game master's handbook, which they call the Scholar's Guide. And the Scholar's Guide's a little thicker than the Dungeon. So this is for your players. Basically the basics of how the game works, how you make a character, and really that's all kind of described here in like the first half of the book. The back half of the book is just an index of, spells, equipment. I think just spells and equipment. And so I haven't actually really looked at what this sort of GM guide has to say. So I was just going to read it. And this isn't like a first look where I'm just kind of like, oh, I'm doing this for the channel and it's fun to take a look at it. I want to run this game. I've got about 10 or so patrons who have expressed some interest in playing this game. And, some of them very excitedly, some of them more like, I am willing to try this weird game out, which I appreciate the honesty. So yeah, I need to read it. This is one of those situations. I got to do my homework. I got to be a good GM here and, learn how the damn game works. So, and it's a complex game. Yeah, it's a complex game. So, there's a lot of factors and moving parts that you want to get right. And I'm a big believer, if you watch my GM tips, is, know the damn game. Read the fucking rule book. So I'm here to read the rule book. So, yeah, this is going to be a very more like an ASMR style stream. I don't know what this is. This is, we're exploring the space here. We've basically reached the pinnacle of our civilization, much like the real world. We've reached the top, and now, we're slowly descending, right? Our channel has basically stopped growing, and our Patreon has shrunk a little bit. Some of that has to do with market conditions, and I've heard a lot of other people saying it's not been as nice for them, other content creators. But for the most part, I'm willing to throw some stuff at the wall and see what sticks. So, we've talked about maybe doing some, product openings, physical books, the top-down rig, and all this other stuff. So just trying stuff out. Anyways, I was just going to read this book. I asked my patrons, I put a poll up and I said, hey, if I start, I made it very vague and cryptic. I said, TB read along, anyone interested? And, it was like, sure, no. And then it was like, what? And, what? Got as many votes as sure. So, yeah. It's Saturday night. We have nothing better to do. Or it's Sunday morning, depending on where you are in the world. Or it's the middle of the night Sunday morning if you're over in Europe. And here we are, because I have nothing better to do. Dan says he has been called and he must answer. You don't have to answer. You could politely leave it on red. That's fine. Good evening, Mr. Boothbay. Lollipop, hello. A lollipop, you could say lollipop is the reason this stream is happening. Because I was like, I don't even know if anybody's online. Lollipop responded. So, Ford, what's up, Ford? TB stream indeed. Something to listen to while I cough up my lungs. I don't think I'm sick. But I definitely, there's definitely some scratchiness, I think. We'll see. We'll see if I get sick. I don't think I will, though. Apparently a bunch of other people are sick as well. Yeah, well, it starts to go around. Your idea of nothing is a lot more than my idea of nothing. Yes, my idea of doing nothing is like, not, I don't know. My idea of nothing is probably more than what most people's idea of nothing is. Sorrel, welcome. Jonas, hello. You ran Dune today. I think it was fun. Yeah, I started to read a little bit of your session synopsis there in the Dune forum or the play channel. I am very interested in knowing how that's running and how that's going for you. Are you a big ice skater? I am actually. This a couple weeks ago, I actually went and bought new ice skates because my old ice skates got destroyed in the garage fire. So I needed to buy a new pair of skates. So I went and I bought a new pair of skates from a hockey store. And today was my first day trying out my new skates. But I played hockey all throughout my youth and my teenage years. And while I don't play hockey anymore, I do like to, sometimes more, sometimes less. But, generally I try to get out on the ice, at least once a month, twice a month, if I can. Sometimes it's more often, but, sometimes it's less. It all depends. But I do love ice skating. It's one thing I love doing. I like rollerblading too. Hello, Thaddeus. Welcome. Audio TTRPG book, The Last Unexplored Niche. Actually, this reminds me of, we saw this at Origins. I think it was Origins 2022. I'm not sure if it was 2022 or 2023, but it was Origins a couple years ago. And Smith and I were there, and we were looking at the RPG products, and we were like, damn, the pickings are very slim. And we saw this one booth, and they were selling audio. They were basically like audio actual plays, okay? But it wasn't like, it was based off of D&D 5e adventures. And, they basically would go and like read the adventure to you, but as if it was a story instead of like reading it as if they were people playing, D&D and not just literally reading you what's in the adventure book. It's like they took the adventure book and then they like converted it into like a story. And then they read it as a story. It was very strange. And I was like, this is either brilliant, right? Or the dumbest thing I've ever seen. I'd love to see if that took off for them or something. Yeah, kind of like module fanfic. That's kind of a way to put it. Yeah, Nutromancer. That's kind of a way to put it. Yeah. Derek says, I'm not called. I'm just up for anything. I don't need to invade. I don't need to conquer anybody. I'm not trying to do that. I just, for me, it's like, hey, I want to make sure I'm providing value to people, and I want to make sure that my patrons and are feeling like they're getting good content, and this is a channel that they want to support. So I'm always trying to be aware of that. It's almost the end of the year. We're going to be sending out our Patreon annual Patreon survey, so I'm curious to see what people say about that. I would imagine ice skating very niche. Yeah, it's very popular here in the U.S., especially here in the Midwest and, you know, so close to Canada and all that other stuff. Lots of kids play. At least it seems like lots of kids play. All empires must expand through conquest or die. This is the way. I mean, listen, we can all share. Thaddeus apparently had a wreck of a session. Ooh, Thaddeus, you want to vent a little bit? You want to tell us what happened? I'm sure people at home would love to hear. Yeah. So this is the book we're going to be going through today. Torchbearer. This is the Scholar's Guide, which is, again, their sort of GM version. So, yeah, I haven't really read this book yet. Again, when you buy the set, the core set, which I do have to give away, by the way, because I do have, you know, I do have that extra pair. So you get the Scholar's Guide and the Dungeoneer's Guide. And I bought an extra set because it was at the game store, and I couldn't leave it alone. I didn't want someone else to pick it up. I wanted to be able to get it, and then who already owns it and give it away or something. Anyways, those two. But the GM special edition set also comes with this book, which is the Lore Masters Manual, which is just basically a splat book, just a bunch of optional rules and some new classes and stuff, but you don't need it. Anyways, so while I'm generally aware of how the GMing role works in Torchbearer, I have not read this book, so that is what we're going to be reading. All right, GM Scott's going to catch up. Awesome, GM Scott. Patreon survey, more NR. Well, Karaba, I mean, you know, people have been playing. I don't, you know, I'm curious to see what. We also do a separate NR survey specifically, and we'll do a survey here as we get into the last couple of weeks of Southern Beaches near the end of the year, and see what people want to do and how they want to do season 3, and you know what we want to plan to do. And I know Smith has done a bunch of work on season 3. I know he didn't finish, which is why Southern Beaches exists. But I don't know what the current state or status of that is. So, and you know, we'll continue to monitor and observe. I mean, overall, I've been very happy with the way Southern Beaches has run, and a big part of that has to do with folks like you, Karama, you know, to, you know, sharing the load and doing a bunch of heavy lifting and really, you know, running a bunch of games and helping a bunch of people out, which is fantastic, you know. Ooh. Thaddeus says, yeah, it was a Memento Mori game, which we did a first look of here not that long ago. It turned into a religious frustration bashing session by the players. One character in particular made me want to just stop, so we ended session 2 hours in. Ouch. Yeah, I could see that game potentially you know, prompting some people to have certain feels and opinions about things. It's unfortunate that it turned into a kind of a bashing thing. Fair enough. It was overall it was a massive misinterpretation of what the game was about, and kind of just threw me way off. Yeah, again, one of the things I struggled with that game was I was like, I'm not really quite sure what it is that we're supposed to do here, or what we're supposed to be against, or what it is that we're not in line with. So I could understand that to a certain degree. All right. And I'm happy to, you know, answer chats and stuff like that, but I'm going to be reading here. So, I do love that they acknowledge here Janelle Jaquays, who of course is the, you know, recently passed actually, for just being one of the original OG dungeon designers. Tom Moldvay, who of course wrote BX D&D, right? One of the probably the most famous basic D&D now because of its kind of being the foundation of the OSR. And then Greg Stafford, who is also not with us, who created King Arthur Pendragon. So that was their like 3 designer shout outs. Hello, Vin. Surprise stream. Yeah, why not? Well, if you ever went on the Discord, you'll see. I was saying I was going to sit down and just read this book tonight. And, you know, it's the evening here now. It gets dark at like 5:30. So it's pitch black out, and I'm calling it a night early. So I was like, I was just going to read this book for this game that I want to play, and I haven't read it, so I was just going to read it. So here we are. He just laughs at me. Laughs at me. You know, this man flew all the way from Australia just to play RPGs with the Knights of Last Call. It's the only reason he came to America. And here he is mocking me for criticizing him. All right. All right. So yeah, I'm just going to kind of read around. I'm just going to kind of read here again. If there's any thoughts, comments, questions, let me know. Here is a grim land. Summers are short, winters are long. The town. Oh, this is supposed to be dramatic. Okay. Here is a grim land. Summers are short, winters are long. The towns are overcrowded. Food is expensive. Guilds control trade. Nobles control taxes. Priests pray for our damned souls. Sounds like Thaddeus's game. Out there, beyond the walls, are beasts, bogies, monsters. They inhabit the forests. They live under the fields, dwell in the ruins of our burned-out fortresses. They kidnap lone wanderers, harry our caravans, and when they are bold, they attack our towns. This land is wild, untamable, and in it we struggle to survive. We who thought we could conquer it, subjugate it, we are but guests here. Our days are numbered. Our forebears succeeded in wedging a toehold, a small point of light in a vast, weird darkness. Their hubris led them to believe they had won, that victory was inevitable, but they were wrong. The forests retaliated. The mountains rebelled. The seas heaved in protest. Things issued forth from crevice and cave. The foam and fire spat forth a writhing, crawling answer to our forebears' conquest. We battled them. We banished them. We flung spell and prayer at them. But they came like a creeping tide, forcing us steadily back. So now most of us crowd into our walled towns and make do with what's been given to us. Some hardy folk brave the long nights, and far behind our defenses work the soil at dawn. A few of us, those with nothing left, take up torch and sword and stride forth into the dark wilds. For underneath the roots are the ruins of those who came before us, layers of foolhardy civilizations crumbling atop one another like corpses stacked in a pit. Each thought they could conquer this land. Each failed. But in failure, they left us hope. They left us gold, artifacts, secrets, knowledge. Those brave or foolish enough to seek these treasures are richly rewarded. Those successful enough can even rise above their station. Thus, by risking our very blood for a handful of coins, perhaps we can become heroes, but only if we survive. Now, right away, I'm just like, that's such a great intro. You gotta love it. I usually hate stuff like this intro and find it cringe, but this isn't terrible. I agree. Number one, it's just long enough, you know, like, okay, we get a couple paragraphs, you know, a couple sentences, basically. I mean, that's all it really was. It wasn't like a 20-page introduction. It's just like, no. And it's more about tone setting than telling a story, right? Which I think is important. So I agree with that. But again, you know, one of the things I even talked about I think we were doing G.I. Joe. Yeah. And I was like, this is just such like an example of not only Luke Crane, but like right into this. Boom. What is this game about? Like you've just read this like thing, which kind of told you what the game is about narratively, but now it's like, boom, right here. What is this game about? Torchbearer is a role-playing game of desperate adventure. It's even written, I think, on the back of the book. Yes, a role-playing game of desperate adventure. In the game, players take on the role of fortune-seeking adventurers. To earn their fortune, they must explore forlorn ruins, brave terrible monsters, and retrieve forgotten treasures. The expeditions they undertake are taxing to body, mind, and their very nature. To survive, they must carefully manage food, water, and light resources. To excel, they must fight for what they believe in. To prosper, they must fill their bags with loot and treasure. So here, this is basically the three things that this game is about. You want to survive, and to do that, you have to carefully manage your food, your water, your light, your resources. To excel, you have to fight for what you believe in. And to prosper, you have to fill your bags with loot and treasure. So obviously old school inspired here, but we already knew that. This triumvirate of competing needs creates a wonderful tension unique to Torchbearer. So the idea is that, right, these three things are often competing, right? If they're a triangle, they're working against each other, right? You know, do you drop, you know, would you drop? Let's poll in chat. We're not going to get far, okay? All right, so poll in chat here. You are deep inside a dungeon with many rooms and corridors before you can, with many rooms and corridors and long miles before you can return to town. All right. You find a vast treasure. Do you drop your spare rations and water skins to carry more loot? Let's see what people say. So there we go. So again, you're deep in the wilderness. You're in that strange, dark, weird darkness. And you know, your inventory is quite limited in this game, and you find a bunch of treasure. You find a bunch of loot. Do you drop your rations, your food? Do you just so you can carry treasure? Anyways, this triumvirate of competing needs creates a wonderful tension unique to Torchbearer. So again, you know, also when I'm reading, you know, I'm trying to think as a GM, by the way, is when I'm reading these books, already I'm thinking, okay, this is what this game is about. And I'm going to trust, if they're good game designers, that they have created mechanics that are going to, you know, support this. Now, of course, one of the reasons I'm critical of some role-playing games is that they don't have what this game's about, which means how could the mechanics be for anything? But I digress. But what this means is when I'm reading this and I'm thinking about how do I GM this game, I am, you know, it's kind of like Legend of the Five Rings, right? Where you want to, this game is like, look, you want to put people's desire up against their duty. You want to have them competing. You want to put someone else's duty up against somebody else's desire, right? To create this kind of intra-party strife. So I'm reading this as a GM, I need to be constantly thinking about how do I push and pull on these three things, because they're going to want to fight for what they believe in to excel. They're going to need to manage their resources to survive, but to prosper, they need to loot treasure. And so you want to be looking for opportunities for how do I make them have to make these tough choices? Because ultimately, that's one of the reasons I'm interested in this game, is because I like RPGs, because I like to put I like to put player characters into really tough situations and then see how the players respond and react to it. That's very interesting to me. All right. Players are asked to weigh these forces in every decision they make. Some may seem easy or frivolous to start, but the deeper they become enmeshed in an adventure, the heavier and more costly each decision becomes. All right. Sure, Beowulf. The intro is so important because it establishes why this game is about dungeon crawling. It's not about nobles and knights. No, this is about dungeon crawling. No, Not a Drummer says, burn the books. I know that spell books take up like 2 slots in your inventory, so it's a lot. Nutrimancer says, I eat all my spare food immediately. If only that worked in this game. Interesting question, considering I go to cons with a backpack full of snacks. Well, no, Boothby, you're just the greatest player of all time. See, what Boothby does is he starts with his backpack full of rations and snacks. And then as the con goes on, he uses those rations, eating them and converting them into player rewards that he wins for being the greatest player of all time. And if he does it at the right balanced scaling tipping point, he will run out of rations just as his backpack continues to fill up with prizes and loot. And so that by the last day of the con, he's out of rations, but he's ready to return home. But his backpack is loaded with free books that he won for being the greatest player of all time. In fact, didn't I have to buy you a book at Origins, Boothby? I think I did. It's good stuff. Let's see here. Self-confessed cynic says, I'm literally usually the only person in my party that would choose no. See, I like your party then. I'm here for a good time, not a long time. GM Scott voted to drop resources. Interesting. All right. So 2/3 of you said no, 15 votes, by the way. 2/3 of you said no, and 1/3 of you said yes. All right. To play the game, one player undertakes the roles of the antagonist, supporting characters, setting, and scenery. This player is called the Game Master. The other players take on the role of individual characters. They are the adventurers. The Game Master's job is to transform the player's adventurer characters into heroes. Okay, so, as Boothby was saying, so now, again, this is me putting the wheels together. The idea is your characters start as, kind of scoundrelly scum of the earth. The thing here is this game basically is sort of setting a bar, and it's saying, if you want to become a hero, you have to earn it, right? It's not something that the game is just going to give you. It's not something that you start as, right? So how do we do this? By challenging the players with obstacles set in their path. It is only by overcoming difficult challenges and passing through the fire of conflict that the players' characters can become heroes. It's a very tough job. The characters are the lowest, most desperate of sorts. Turning them into heroes is no mean feat. What kind of game is this? Torchbearer is a role-playing game. It's about making difficult choices, and it involves exploring the world and your character through the game rules and systems. Now, look, there's a reason I'm a Luke Crane fanboy, but a sentence like this, I mean, this is everything for me. It's about making difficult choices. Fuck yes. And it involves exploring the world. Great. And your character. Awesome. Through the game rules and systems, aka it's a role-playing game. And that is everything to me. I love it. It is not a simple game. All right, well, that's not always so great, but we understand what we're buying here. There are many moving parts, and it's not possible to experience the whole game in 1 or even 2 sessions. If you prefer lighter games, there are many other excellent choices available for you designed by our friends. However, if you're ready to sink your teeth into a good game that will reward you for mastering the system over 10 or 20 sessions, this is the game for you. Vin says, I already feel like I'd hate this game. Oh, you would hate it so much. All right. In the spectrum of Burning Wheel HQ books, Torchbearer is advanced mouse. By the way, if you're, let's think about it this way. If you are a fan of this channel, or if you weren't a fan of this channel, most of these games, I almost assure you that almost all of these games would be completely unknown to you. But the fact that you are a KOLC member means that you know not only what Mouse Guard is or what Burning Wheel is, but you even fucking know what Free Market is, okay? Anyways, it is advanced Mouse Guard. While it is not as complex as Burning Wheel or Burning Empires, it's certainly more involved than Mouse Guard or even Free Market. Let's see. We need a few things to play properly. Rulebook, sheets, reference, pencils, dice. We'll also need some tokens, coins, or stones for the conflict rules. Around 20 to 30 should suffice. There are 2 rulebooks essential. Okay, yada, yada. The Dungeoneer Handbook describes all the experience of a character in the game and contains all the specific information specific to them. Creation, abilities, skills, spells, invocations, and advancement. And while not required, we highly recommend that each player have a player deck. It contains weapons, conditions, and light card. This book is broken down into 4 main sections: a scholar's guide to dangers various and sundry, safe havens and other poor assumptions, calamity, calumny, and catastrophe, and then a reference section. Scholar's Guide contains the rules for running the game, setting the difficulty of tests, tracking time, engaging players in conflicts like fights and arguments, suffering and recovering from conditions, and rewarding players for engaging with their beliefs, goals, creeds, and instincts. Safe Havens and Other Poor Assumptions describes the downtime mechanics for Torchbearer, camp phase, town phase, and respite. And Calamity, Calumny, and Catastrophe is a selection of tools for the Game Master: how to design an adventure, how to seed it with loot and adversaries, and advice on doing so. It also includes a sample adventure. And then reference is lists of camp and town events, twists, and our bibliography. All right. Then if you're reading this book for your less ambitious mates, we recommend you read this book, but focus on the Scholar's Guide, Safe Havens, and Calamity sections. In particular, be familiar with overcoming obstacles, the grind, conditions, and recovery and conflict. These are the chapters you will refer to most during play. You'll also want to familiarize yourself with the skills and traits chapter from the Dungeoneer's Handbook, the Player's Handbook. All right. Let's see here. What's up, Jackal? Jackal was one of our winners today. or the other day. We've been doing raffles, some for free, some for tickets for our patrons, handing out a bunch of gift certificates as we celebrate our 4-year anniversary coming up at the end of this month. About exploring the world, but are there more mechanics about exploration or punching goblins? I wonder. I don't know. I mean, yes, maybe. All right. During structure of play. Okay. Before the first session, the game master should sketch a map of the region the characters are in. Okay. During the first session, the players create characters. After that, if you have time, you'll dive right into the opening scenes of an adventure. During a session, the players use their characters to tackle an adventure. A typical session consists of the prologue, one or more adventure phases, and a camp phase or town phase. Torchbearer has 3 distinct phases of play: adventure, camp, and town. Adventure is where the magic and action happens. The game master presents a situation and a number of obstacles. The players describe how their characters overcome those obstacles. Adventuring is hard work. When the characters are a bit knackered and need a break, they enter the camp phase. In camp, they can rest, repair their gear, and recharge their magical capabilities, but camp is short, and then they usually jump straight back into the adventure phase. After the players complete an adventure, they should have some loot to trade and spend. To do that, they return to town. Town allows characters to level up and re-equip, as well as rest off the nastier wounds and illnesses. Of course, town is expensive, so they don't want to stay too long, lest the bill collectors come knocking. All right. Paint the scenes through vivid description. What's in the environment? What can you see? What people or monsters are present? What are they doing? Any sounds? What does it smell like? The game master constructs an image through their description. As the players explore, they imagine how their characters would experience this place through their eyes and other senses. The players then describe their characters' actions in this context to each other and the game master, right? Fiction first. Lead with the fictions. All right. Descriptive details are nice. Oh, this is section problems. Descriptive details are nice, but keep in mind that the primary responsibility of the game master is to place problems in the paths of the characters. All right. The primary responsibility of the game master is to place problems in the paths of the characters. Without challenges, the characters will never grow and change. A strong arc of play lasts for 10 to 12 sessions of 2 to 4 hours each, enough time to level a few times and see the characters grow and change. That's our recommendation, but you can play fewer or more sessions if you want. Jackal's going to pick up Deep Cuts. Good choice. I think it's very compelling. There's a lot of interesting stuff in there. They say it's modular, but I don't know how much it is. I think some of it does really, kind of connect together. Hello, Will. Greetings. Derek is, Mr. Rawlings is vibing with a bunch of this stuff. All right. Dice and terms. Okay. Torchbearer uses common 6-sided dice for all rolls. In order to decide the outcome of uncertain events in the game, we roll handfuls of dice, usually 3 to 6. The number of dice you roll depends on how skilled your character is in a particular area and how much help you have, in addition to a few other considerations. In every roll, every die counts as its own result. It's either a yes or a no. A yes is called a success. The more successes, the better. Any die that comes up as a no result is a hindrance to your cause and doesn't count. We call these dice worms. They're bad for business. All right. A 4, 5, or 6 is a success. And a 1, 2, or 3 is a worm. All right. Rolling a handful of 5 dice. My luck gives me a 1, 2, 2, 4, and a 5. 2 of the dice are 4 or higher. Thus, I rolled 2 successes. When you roll the dice, you need successes in order to pass tests. Obstacles. Obstacles are integral to the game. The difficulty of a test is the obstacle. Obstacles are descriptive, aka a steep climb, a rusty lock, a stubborn bill collector. But they're also described as a number, usually from 1 to 10. The number attached to the obstacle tells you how many successes you need to roll to pass the test. If the rusty lock is an obstacle 4 test, I have to roll 4 successes on my criminal skill to pass the test and open the lock. Since obstacle is a game system term for Torchbearer, we often shorten it to OB, followed by a number indicating the difficulty. OB 6 tests are tough to pass. So there is a reason that you can use D6 Beowulf, which is in certain circumstances, you can spend one of your kind of hero point type things to make any 6s that you roll explode. They don't explode by default. You have to like use one of your points that you get at the end of a session for following your belief or engaging with your goal. All right. Twist or condition. If you do not roll enough successes to meet your obstacle, the game master introduces a twist, which is a new obstacle, or gives you a condition in exchange for getting what you want, success. So if you fail, the options are either a new obstacle is presented or you succeed. You just gain a condition. Plus 1d, plus 2d. This is nomenclature to add that number of dice before you roll. If you see the notation for 2d, that just means 2 dice. Minus 1d, minus 2d means subtract the number of dice. All right. Plus 1s, plus 2s. This notation indicates that a number of bonus successes are applied to passed or tied rolls, never to failed rolls. Plus 1s means that if you've passed or tied the roll, add another success to your total. Minus 1s, minus 2s means that you subtract the number of indicated successes after you've rolled, pass or fail. Interesting. Okay, so the bonus successes are only bonus successes. They're not like full successes. Help is a potent mechanism in Torchbearer. If you have the same skill or ability that another player has been called to test, you can assist your mate in the endeavor. Your help is worth plus 1 die to this test, and when you do help, pass them one of your dice. It's the law of the land. Some rules in the game allow you to re-roll a die that comes up a 6. When using these rules, leave the die that rolled a 6 on the table so it can be counted, pick up a new die, and roll it for your bonus roll. If you roll another 6, pick up another new die and roll it, and so on. Finish re-rolling. If you have a penalty that subtracts successes, re-roll all your dice before you count success. We all know what 2d6, 3d6 means. You'll see the term margin of success. Reduce your opponent's disposition by your margin of success. Margin of success is a game term that means count each success over what you needed to pass the test and use that number. Right? If you needed 3 successes, but you rolled 5 successes, you have a margin of success of 2. And a margin of failure is the opposite. All right. The grind, as you adventure, your character will suffer from the inequities of the world. They'll become hungry and thirsty, angry, afraid, exhausted, injured, and sick. And if you don't help them cure these conditions, they will perish. We call this reality, and the system it represents, the grind. And then there are other terms, but we'll present those in the chapters. So that's just sort of an overview. All right, so let's get into it. All right, a scholar's guide to dangers various and sundry. Let's see if we can make it through this chapter. All right, prepare thyself. All right. Before sitting down to play Torchbearer, the game master prepares a regional map. On it, they note important locations and those who populate them. For your starter map, include the following settlements and geographical features. Give them names appropriate to your setting. So they want us to add a bustling metropolis. While often the capital, this grand city isn't necessarily so. The bustling metropolis sits on a river or harbor and is the hub of all commerce. A busy roads along a river or vital trade route. While not as big, it is still a vibrant place full of shrewd folk. The dwarven halls. Beneath the mountains, the dwarven halls hum with industry and craft. The elf home is a land of peace hidden from mortals. It can only be found through secret entrances known to the elves. The forlorn fortress. Sitting on the borderland between here and nowhere, what does it defend? The religious bastion. Fortified and forbidding. This citadel is a combination of fortress, cathedral, and seminary. Remote village, the backbone of society. Remote villages dot the hinterlands. Their residents till the soil for its meager gifts, herd the cattle for their stringy meats, and plumb the sea for its turbid fruits, all in the service of some petty noble lord who wants only their table full and their taxes paid. And the wizard's tower. The power of wizardry is looked upon with suspicion. The townsfolk might mutter to themselves, how could one person wield such might? Thus this potentate has made their home in a remote land, but their followers and petitioners have erected a small village nearby, so it's better to attend to their master's peculiar needs. And they want us to add a coast, and a forest, and a lost place. Far from civilization sits a forbidding place where few dare to tread. Is it a swamp, a hidden dell, a frozen lake, a yawning chasm? Mountains. A line of forbidding mountains marches across the border. a river, a road, and a ruin. All right. Once you've sketched a map using these locations, make notes about the populations. Obviously, elf home and dwarven holes are home to their respective people. But what about the halflings? Usually they're from remote villages or shires, as they tend to be a quiet folk. Where do the rulers of this place reside? Is the bustling metropolis a trade hub or a political capital? Or perhaps the rulers sit in the forlorn fortress, surrounded by soldiers and dark rumors. Here be dragons. Note on the map the dwelling places of goblins, orcs, and last but certainly not least, note the lands under the sway of giants and dragons. So here's just an example map. The author is Scandinavian. His name's Thor. Or he's Norwegian. I think he's Norwegian. Included it. Looks like there's a coast. Okay. There's a road. Maybe the big capital city here. It's a cool map, actually. Fraborgen. Ah, yes, Fraborgen. The Iron World. All right. Let's see here. So this is just an example of him drawing the map. I'm pretty much going to skip this here. But just about how to draw a map and body of water and how he did it and basically how he drew that map here. With the backbone of my map done, it was time to place some settlements. I needed a starting base for the players, not necessarily a character's hometown, but a place that doesn't have any adventures attached to it. The characters will be able to return to spend their plores. For that purpose, I created Asktoff, a busy crossroads that serves as a seat of a Got rider, a knight of the Got tribe named Gree. I decided to put a walled town in the north. That's Holtberg. There are almost certainly more remote villages and steadings located on this map, but we'll discover them later, and that's an important point, actually. You don't need a ton of detail to start. You need enough to give your players a sense of place and maybe to inspire some curiosity. Oh, look at this. My friends Adam and Sage I was about to say, it sounds like draw maps, leave blanks. My friends Adam and Sage nailed this concept in Dungeon World with their Game Master principles, the very first on the list of which is draw maps, leave blanks. Dungeon World exists mostly in the imaginations of the people playing it. Maps help everyone stay on the same page. You won't always be drawing them yourself, but anytime there's a new location described, make sure it gets added to the map. When you draw a map, don't try to make it complete. Leave room for the unknown. As you play, you'll get more ideas, and the players will give you inspiration to work with. Let the maps expand and change. All right. Cool. And just adding some dungeons and ruins and some other cool stuff here. So that's pretty cool that they kind of give you that little section on how they built that map. All right. Once you've gathered your crew and created characters, it's time to set out. If this is your first session, jump right into your first adventure. If this is an ongoing game, start with a prologue. At the start of each session after the first, one player recounts the events of the previous session. If the group is satisfied and well reminded by their prologue, then the recounting player may alleviate one condition, except injured or sick, in recovery order, so they can alleviate hungry and thirsty, or angry, or afraid, or exhausted. If they have no conditions, they can restore a point of taxed nature. If they have no tax or no conditions, they can reduce their immortal burden by 1 or memorize a first circle spell. That's for spellcasters. If no one has conditions or tax at the start of the session, then the game master has been too nice. Interesting. One cannot deliver the prologue 2 sessions in a row. Share the spotlight. Okay. So here you go. A literal mechanic rule for, hey, a player, tell us what happened last time. Give us the prologue. And you literally get mechanical effects in game. So talk about a meta mechanic, right? All right. Once the prologue is given, the game master lays out the obstacles directly ahead of the characters. Where are they? What's around them? What adversaries seek their destruction? First time mage. If you have any magicians in your crew and this is their first sessions, they should choose which of their spells they have at the ready. Once the adventure is laid out, instruct the players to write goals for their characters. It's time to pull together. If the group is continuing from a previous adventure, they can change or modify their goals as they see fit. They should make changes after the game master describes the obstacles in front of the characters. Change beliefs or instincts. If something transpired last session to make the players think differently about their character's philosophy or methods, encourage them to modify their beliefs and instincts to reflect their new perspectives. The leader. Often one character will drum up a lead. Maybe they find the map. They hear the rumor from their friends, or perhaps they need to remove a pesky curse. This character is considered the leader for this adventure. Leadership is an informal role. Leaders settle disputes among the characters about direction or method of approach, and the role changes with each adventure. Each player should have a chance to lead an expedition during a campaign. In Torchbearer, the leader and the game master are both responsible for passing the spotlight around so that each player has a chance to shine out and address challenges. Outside of conflicts, a light turn-taking system works best. Each player should have a chance to lead a test to overcome an obstacle. Turn-taking is not a requirement, as this is a role-playing game. It is natural that in the flow of play, one character might take the spotlight for a bit as they resolve something important to them. However, outside of these climactic circumstances, take turns, even if it is suboptimal in terms of gamemanship. When exploring, we ask the leader to listen to everyone's ideas, not just the most vocal players. Encourage a player to take the lead, even if their character is unskilled or has a low skill or ability. Mapping. It is traditional among adventurers to draw maps of their travels, though they're rarely shared because maps are considered trade secrets and are closely guarded. Occasionally, you'll stumble upon a lost or forgotten map in your travels. They're quite valuable. The cartographer. At the table, no player is required to draw a map of the areas the game master describes. In fact, we actively discourage it. It slows down play. That said, one player, usually the player with the highest cartographer skill, should keep a descriptive log of the areas and locations you visit. This log can later be translated into a map using the cartographer skill. This map allows you to travel through the wilds and dungeons a bit more freely. A map that the cartographer has created does not require an inventory slot. Travel between locations logged on a map does not incur a test, unless the area has significantly changed due to weather, war, or disaster, the denizens of who inhabit the place have returned, or the state of the characters have notably changed. They're badly wounded, they're dripping blood while trying to escape direwolves, they're carrying something far too massive to easily fit through the passages, or they got lost on their route. In play, the mapper and the leader often act as a team. The leader sets an objective, and then the mapper navigates to the location. Or the leader will ask for more information about an area, and the mapper will provide the details. Meanwhile, missing a session. If your group plays an ongoing game and a player misses a session, they get a little boost to help catch them back up. After the prologue, they tell everyone where their character has been. They should make up something cool, but keep it short, and make sure it fits with the group's current predicament. Once they've done that, they may alleviate a condition, restore past point of text nature, or recover a spell. Sama says, when you all... or you can also mark a test for advancement, pass or fail. When you all left town, I remained behind to study, and Luke marks a pass test for his scholar skill. If they have unspent checks left over from the last session they played, they may keep them and spend them during the next camp phase. If a player misses the town phase, they cannot start the next session fresh, but they don't have to pay their bills either. If the leader misses a session, another member of the group familiar with the group's current predicament should assume the mantle for the session. Ooh, rough. If the group's cartographer is missing, they do not have access to their map. Nice. Again, love it or leave it. Yes, cartographer is very much fast travel, is the way that works. If you have a player jumping into an ongoing game, be sure to meet with them early to help them create a character. Don't make everyone wait while they make their character. You know, see, it's advice like this that is missing. In D&D and Pathfinder, just like this, like very like, don't be a dick, don't be like the rest of the players are busy people too. Don't sit there and just show up with no character and expect, the whole group to wait while you make a character. It's rude. Beowulf had said something. Dr. Metropolis says the fortress is simply the home of a 9th level fighter. Naturally, it could be. That'd be pretty awesome. Beowulf says, one of my Pendragon GMs kept hammering home, there are no maps. So whenever we tried to look up a map to see where we're going and how long it would take to get there, it was actually very immersive. Yeah, I mean, I've played games where, you know, there were no like maps. And it can be effective, but it does make it harder for people to like plan and understand what things are doing and what's going on. Before we plunge into the golden field, this is factors of success. Before we plunge into the golden fields of Elysium that surely comprise the next chapters, we must discuss a difficult matter or two. The wise one hung on the tree of life for 9 days to gain the knowledge of how to determine the difficulty of a test. We will need the rubrics the wise one learned to help us truly understand the mysteries of obstacles, conflicts, conditions, and recovery. The chapter of our gnomic manual that you are about to read contains information, instruction, and guidance on the operation of our elegant and simple game system. Obstacles. The difficulty of a test is listed as a number, rated from 1 to 10. We call this number the obstacle. It indicates how many successes need to be overcome to that which keeps us from our glory. Factoring obstacles. We determine an obstacle's rating in 3 ways. It could be set by the game master or by one of the game rules. It could be created by your opponent's roll in the case of a versus test, or it can be built from factors. Factors are elements of an obstacle that make success less likely. They appear in skills, spells, invocations, and other core game rules. With abilities, skills, spells, and invocations, you'll find lists of items or possibilities broken down into categories. The items in each category are listed in order of difficulty. When you use a skill to overcome an obstacle, the game master consults the skill description and chooses which categories are applicable to the situation. If a factor sets contain a single category, use that value. If they contain related categories, you will see a plus sign next to the categories, meant to be added from the category. Add the value of each test to the appropriate. The total becomes the obstacle for the test. All right. Anthony's Elf Ranger. Well, let's first take a look at this skill. Yeah, okay. So this is the Hunter skill, which is one of the skills in the game. Hunter. And by the way, this skill description, this path, this entire page, this is in the sort of the index of the player's guide. Okay, so the players have access to this. All right. Nobles, they're hunters, and of course poachers, use this skill to lure, stalk, trap, and slay beasts for food in forested preserves and in the wild. The hunter skill is used to examine the nature of beasts as well as to stalk, trap, or capture prey. For bringing down a beast, make a versus test using hunter, the skill, versus the beast's nature, or use a kill or capture conflict. Use the hunter skill for feint and maneuver in capture conflicts. Hunters may read the aspects of a creature's nature. Make a versus test between the hunter and the creature's natures. Success indicates they may discover a descriptor, a weapon, or their might. Otherwise, use the factors below. So this tells us that this skill uses health for beginner's luck. To help this skill, obviously hunter can always help itself, but you can also be helped by people who have the survivalist or laborer skill. Gear that can help are bows, javelins, boar spears, dogs, horses, birds of prey. And then here's an example of the factors. So for example, bestial habits. Like if we have, if we're trying to stalk a creature and, we have trails and it's a common animal, this has the plus sign. So we would say 1 + 1 is 2. So the obstacle would be 2. If we were creating a snare and net, it'd be obstacle 1. And if we're doing it for a small animal and monster, we would add +1. So that would be obstacle 2. That's the DC that we need to roll. Anthony's Elf Ranger explores the fetid Rushmores. He wants to know more about the fauna here, so he tells the game master, Luke, that he's looking for game trails amongst the reeds and rushes. Luke considers the most significant creatures he has planned for this adventure and looks at the hunting skill's stalking factors. He adds trails, 1, to shy beast, 2. Those factors make an obstacle 3 hunter test for Anthony. He rolls and passes. And so Luke describes flattened trails of reeds leading to the creeks made by the massive turtleoids who call the Rushmores home. Well, that looks like an owl bear. So we can see here, right? Trails 1, and then rare or shy beast is a +2. So admittedly, I mean, you could kind of like, you can kind of like eyeball this. You can kind of like, as a GM, you don't like, I mean, obviously you could look it up in the book and, get it specifically right. But remember, making a skill check is a big deal in Torchbearer. So while there's a little bit of work that goes into it, like you're really only making like one check. Making a single check is kind of a big deal. So there's a little bit of work that goes into it, but you could also just eyeball it. Obstacles usually fall within the 2 to 5 range. A character competent in a skill has a rating of 4. To demonstrate how difficult obstacles are, here are some probabilities. Ob 1, 90%, Ob 2, 66%, with 4 dice. Ob 3, 33%, Ob 4, 5%, Ob 5, 0%. Obviously, you'll need more dice if you want to do something that requires 5 successes and you're only rolling 4 dice. All right, overcoming obstacles. Above you looms a slick rock wall. There's a small, dark opening at the top, your only hope of escape. You can hear gnolls barking in the caves, getting closer and closer. What do you do? Obstacles are problems you must overcome on your path to loot and glory. They consist of creatures, terrain features, complexities, calamities, plans, inventions, and strategies. During play, your game master describes the environment and enemies around you. As you explore and question that description, the game master will describe specific hazards you need to overcome or bypass in order to continue. You overcome obstacles by describing your character's actions. After hearing the description of her predicament, Meryl says, "I clamber up the rock wall as fast as I can." Once you know the problem to overcome and what you'll do to conquer it, the game master assigns the test to a specific skill or ability. Thor consults the skills chapter and replies, "Climbing slick rock walls underground. That calls for the Dungeoneer skill. The factors lists a 1 person ascending a vertical pitch is Ob 2. Test to overcome. You overcome obstacles by testing one of your skills or abilities. A test is a roll of the dice. The rating of your ability or skill indicates the number of dice rolled. You will either pass or fail. The game master, Thor, has indicated that Meryl's magician, Cisneros, must pass an obstacle 2 Dungeoneer test. Fortunately, Cisneros has a Dungeoneer skill rating of 2. Meryl rolls 2 dice and gets a 4 and a 5. 2 successes. She passes. Never volunteer. If a player describes their character's actions in relation to an obstacle, volunteers for a task, or lays out a highly detailed plan that mysteriously doesn't involve risking their character, they make the test. There's no backing out. Strategizing. Huddle up and discuss your options. Come up with a good plan before describing your actions to the game master. There are 2 types of tests, independent and versus. An independent test has a fixed obstacle. A versus test has an obstacle generated by rolling against another player or the game master. Testing a skill or ability and counting factors using independent conflict or being assigned an obstacle all count as independent tests. When making an independent test, you roll a skill or ability plus any help or bonuses. If you get number of successes equal to or greater than the obstacles, you pass the test. Meryl's test to climb the wall was an independent test. It was set by the skill factors, not any sort of opposing roll. Versus test. When fighting with, racing against, convincing, pushing, or competing with another character, beast, creature, or spirit in the game, you will use versus tests. Roll your rating or skill rating and muster any bonuses you're using before you or your opponent rolls. You pass your test if you roll more successes than your opponent. You fail if you roll fewer successes. As Cisneros clambers up the rock wall, Thor describes the barking of gnolls growing closer. So McFerrin describes their warrior, Gudrun, rushing to the door of the room and shouldering it closed before the gnolls come. Thor nods and calls for a versus test between Gudrun's health, 5, and the gnolls' ambushing nature, 5. Thor rolls 3 successes to McFerrin's 2, so the GM 1. He describes Gudrun reaching the door just as a massive black snout pushes through. After a brief struggle, Gudrun is thrown back and the gnolls burst in. Versus test factors. In the event that a factor applies to a versus test, such as fleeing in darkness, for example, add a -1 to the roll as opposed to the standard +1 ob. Okay. So is that the one test they get for that segment? I'm so confused. Yes, it is. If a versus test is tied, okay, right. So with independent obstacle, if it's obstacle 3, okay, then you need 3 successes or more to succeed. So if you equal it, you beat it. But in a versus test, you have to actually get more than your opponent. All right. If you tie, you have to break it. So if a versus test is tied, there are ways you might break it. You might get bonus successes from traits, might, and gear breaking ties in your favor. A level 3 trait grants +1 success and breaks the tie in your favor. If you have higher might or precedence in conflicts, that can give you a bonus success. If you have a gear or a weapon, that grants you a +1 to your success. You can spend a persona point, which is one of your awards at the end of the session, to activate the of course aspect of a wise and try to roll more successes. If you rolled 1 or more 6s, you can spend a fate point to re-roll them. You can spend a fate point to activate deeper understanding. This allows you to re-roll one of your worms, that's a failure, to try to get an additional success. You can use a trait to break a tie in your opponent's favor, and that earns you 2 checks for use in the next camp phase. So we talked about this before when we talked about Torchbearer, but one of the things that you need to do in this game is occasionally use your traits against yourself to earn what are called checks. And yes, it's a gamist mechanic. It is nothing to do with any sort of simulation. It doesn't make any sense. Or you go to a tiebreaker roll. Okay. So there's a lot of different ways to break ties. If a tiebreaker roll is a second versus test between the 2 opponents. Tiebreaker tests are made alone, you against your adversary, no help. If you used a skill in the initial test, use will or health to break the tie, depending on the skill. If you rolled will or health in the initial roll, use your nature. And if you rolled nature, use will or health. Monsters always use their nature in tiebreaker rolls. Whoever wins the tiebreaker roll wins the versus test. If the tiebreaker roll results in a second tie, players may use the tie-breaking methods to eke out a win. If the player does not break the second tie in their favor, they fail the test, and the game master should apply a twist or a condition. All right. So Dro, I guess a player, Dro tells Thor, I'll hold off the gnolls while the rest escape. Thor inquires for more info. What does Hargold do exactly? Dro says, I position myself inside the mouth of this cave so I can see down the tunnel. Then I load my crossbow and take aim. Thor nods. A gnoll scout emerges from the shadows down the tunnel. I put bolt in his face. Right. Make a fighter skill test versus its ambushing nature. Dro announces 3 successes. 6, 4, and a 4. Thor intones. 3 successes here. It's a tie. What will you do, little dwarf? Now, Dro, the player, could use his health 5 to make a tiebreaker roll against the gnoll, but he rolled a single 6 in his 6-4-4. So he first opts to spend a fate point to re-roll that die, hoping for another success. It comes up a 2. So now he has to choose to go to a tiebreaker roll or use his trait against himself and break the tie in Thor's favor. After some consideration, he opts to break the tie in Thor's favor, the GM's favor. The player character declares, I'm so cunning. His trait must be cunning. I wait for way too long to try to lure him in. He used his cunning trait, to get in his own way, and he earns 2 checks for his trouble. Advancement is described in its own chapter, but it bears mentioning here that if you break a tie in your favor, then you mark a passed test for that skill or ability. And if you break a tie in your opponent's favor, you mark a failed test for that ability or skill. If you go to a tiebreaker roll, you do not mark a pass or fail for the first roll. You mark a pass or test for the tie-breaking ability according to the results of the test. PvP. See Tricks of the Trade chapter for rules on player versus player situations. In general, this is a very bad idea. Winging it. You'll probably find uses for skills, spells, and invocations that are not included in the listed factor categories. When that happens, the game master judges obstacles on the fly. Use the existing examples as guidelines and try to find where this new situation sits on that scale. Situational factors, dim light and darkness. Characters near a light source, but not in it, are counted as in dim light. Any action can be performed in dim light. However, dim light counts as a factor in all tests unless otherwise noted. Remember, factor means +1 to the DC, to the obstacle. Characters in total darkness are limited in what actions they can take. See the light heading. And for all actions that can be taken in darkness, except riddling, darkness counts as a factor. So you can riddle in the dark without any penalty. Evil Game Master factors. The Game Masters are not evil, and we shouldn't tarnish their sterling reputations. If there are other elements that hinder adventurers' chances of success during a test, the Game Master increases the obstacle by 1 for each. These factors include, but are not limited to, tight spaces, slippery footing, clinging to a rope or sheer surface, extreme temperatures, improper attire at court, etc., etc. So basically, you're building a DC. When you pass a skill test, your character succeeds at the task. You should offer a little bit of description to celebrate the moment. After that, the Game Master gets to embellish what happened in order to move the story forward. Now, Dr. Metropolis says, oof, static, pass, or fail. Sort of, because failure. If a player fails an ability or skill test, one of two things happen. The Game Master introduces a twist, which is a new obstacle, or the character accomplishes their task, but receives a condition for their efforts. So in this situation, the situation is you could still succeed with a complication, in this case, a condition, but it's up to the GM. The GM gets to make that decision. It's not based off of the die roll. So instead of it just being like 3 bands from the dice, you just get player succeeds or you get GM chooses. Either there's a twist or they succeed, but with a cost. Peyton, PF2 Core Remaster Core 2 is out on Nethys. Well, when do you plan to do the review you mentioned a while ago? In the next couple of weeks, probably. It depends. I have a couple of people who, from my Patreon, who've been playing Pathfinder 2 pretty much nonstop for the last, 4 years, but certainly the last year with Pathfinder Remaster. I have to check their schedule. And obviously, in 2 weeks is Thanksgiving. A lot of people will be pretty busy about that. I wouldn't be surprised if it was like in early December before the holiday season rush. All right. So we can either twist or we can give them success with a condition. Twist. Twists are new challenges to overcome. They can be immediate obstacles. You're ambushed while you dither at the door, or something that causes trouble further down the line. So kind of, right, hard move or soft move. Twists can also be played so that the character appears to have succeeded at their task, but in truth, they've just waded deeper into trouble. Dralic searches the dark stairs for traps and fails his scout test. When the group arrives at the bottom of the stairs, they're ambushed by a manticore. Well done, Dralic. Fun once. Don't make the same test for the same obstacle twice. Either the players have bypassed the original obstacle, or it stands, but they have to find another way around, testing a different ability or different skill against another obstacle. So you just can't, if the door's locked, you can't just spam lock picking on it until somebody gets through it. Dro's thief, Mirgan, fails to pick the lock to the storeroom in time, and a patrol of troglodytes and their Turtloid leader round the corner, spotting him. What's worse, he jammed the lock. Once his companions deal with these foul creatures, they'll have to kick in the door if they want to get at the supplies within. You can't use the same skill again. So the fun once rule basically says if you do not make the same test for the same obstacle twice. Condition. On the other hand, failing a roll can earn you a condition. In this case, you get what you were after, but you also earn a condition. Hungry and thirsty, angry, afraid, exhausted, injured, sick, or even dead. Thor declares that Dro's dwarf, Hargold, drives off the Null Scout with his cunning shot. Remember the guy before who shot the arrow? Thor declares that he drives off the Null Scout with his cunning shot, but Hargold knows that there are more of them out there, and he's running out of options. For the first time, he feels fear in his heart. Mark the afraid condition. Game Master decides. The Game Master decides if it's a twist or a condition when a player fails a roll. The Game Master describes the resulting scene. How does the character foul up and get tied in knot? How did they barely succeed? What unforeseen obstacle disrupts their efforts? Exemptions. Conflict tests and recovery failure. Failed tests in a conflict are exempt from the twist and condition rules. Consider a conflict to be one long test made up of many small parts. The twists or conditions come at the end. Failed tests to recover from conditions are also exempt from the failure rules. Failing a recovery test means you're still saddled with that condition, and that's quite enough pain. We don't need to rub salt in your wounds. All right, help. When out in the wild, it's important that adventurers lend their companions a helping hand so they can all make it out alive. To help, wait until the acting player has described an action, then describe how your character helps. If a player can't describe a relevant action, they cannot help. The acting player can accept or decline help. The helping die. If your frenemy accepts your help, hand them one of your dice. When offering a helping die, make sure that it looks different from the others being rolled so that you can see if you helped or not. If testing will or health, resources, or circles, anyone can help using the same ability. If rolling nature, helpers must have a descriptor that relates to the test. Skills help skills and abilities. When an adventurer tests a skill, they can be helped with the same skill or with one of the suggested help skills listed in that skill entry. Even then, help is situational. It must make sense to the players. The game master is the final arbiter on who or what can help and can't help. Suggested help. The skill list offers suggested help for each skill. Help for a test of that skill is limited to those options and to one other skill as determined by the game master to be appropriate in that situation. The game master determines the optional help skill. So not the players, the game master. When helping a player who is using beginner's luck, first look to your skills. If you have a skill that the beginner would be testing, give them a helping die. If you don't have the skill, you can help the beginner with will or health. If an ability or skill is reduced to 0 because of injury or sickness, you cannot use that to provide help. Wises are not help. Using a wise to provide aid to another character is not considered help in these rules. You reap what you sow. Everyone who contributes a helping die to a test is bound by the results of the roll. If passed, everyone who participated in the test shares in the result. If a failed test results in a twist, the whole group suffers. If the game master applies a condition, things get juicy. If the game master applies a condition as a result of a failed test, then the player who rolled suffers that condition. The helping players suffer a lesser condition of the game master's choice. If the primary character is made hungry and thirsty, then all helpers are made hungry and thirsty. There's no lesser condition, so the least condition applies. All right. Anthony's elf ranger, Thor's magician, and Dro's thief are digging a ditch to try to flood a turtleoid lair. Anthony tests laborer, while Thor and Dro help by describing their efforts. Anthony fails the test, so the game master indicates that the ranger is exhausted from the effort, a condition, while the magician and the thief are merely angry that their vast talents are being wasted away in this wretched swamp. If a character already suffers from the condition being applied, they do not take another condition in its place. Okay, good to know. They're miserable enough as it is. Wise free. When using a wise with the I am wise effect, contributing a die of aid to a friend's roll, the wise one does not suffer a condition if their friend fails the test, though they are still affected by twists. Adventurers can help on an instinct-triggered test if they have a similar instinct or similar nature descriptor. Otherwise, they're not in a position to help. Adventurers may not help someone with a will or health test for recovery, to heal, or a resources test to pay bills when leaving town. We're all on our own against death and taxes. All right. The grind. Okay, well, this is definitely something. Not sure I fall on it, but I'm off to enjoy my Sunday. Vin, take care. It was good to talk to you, buddy. I miss you. You should. Hopefully, you get some time in the holidays. Maybe we can hang out. Maybe we can figure out a way to get a game going, another holiday game or something. All right. Adventurers burn through torches, consume rations, and grow weary. When they run out of supplies unexpectedly or exhaust themselves, they court disaster. Time is a vital component of this game. It determines how and when those supplies run out. Torchbearer tracks the inexorable grind of time with 4 different measures: phases, turns, checks, and lifestyle. Phase is the largest measurement of time. There are 3 phases: adventure, camp, and town. Action happens in the adventure phase. This phase usually lasts 2 to 12 hours of game time. It is broken down into turns. It's a pity tip from Vin. Good stream. Hey, look, we're just hanging out. We're just shooting the shit. Seriously, though, Vin, I'd love to get you guys, I'd love to get you back on the stream. I don't know you've been playing PF2, but we're going to be talking about PF2 a bunch. I don't know if you have anything to add. The camp phase is used to rest and re-equip. It usually represents a night. In order to enter the camp phase, characters must have at least 1 check among them. So in this game, you literally cannot go camp unless you have this meta currency of checks. Excellent, Vin. Excellent. Town phase begins when adventurers enter town and ends when they leave. It typically lasts a week, if not several weeks. In towns, they get a few free tests, but otherwise they have to pay for what they use. See the town chapter rules. All players enter and leave a phase together. One cannot return to town while their mates finish up with the dragon. You can't take a nap at the camp while your friends dicker around with the Minotaur King. Again, like I said, there's a couple places that people get lost on Torchbearer. And the one here is time, turns, is not related to the physical passage of time. It is a resource. It is a gaming resource. It is a narrative tension device. It is not physically time. That's why it's called turn. Not 15 minutes, not 10 minutes. It's called turn. In the adventure phase, time moves in turns. A turn contains a test or a conflict, along with plenty of discussion, exploration, and roleplay. As the turn progresses, characters grow hungry and weary. A turn is not a fixed amount of time. It could be a 10-minute skirmish or a night's watch. Turns are dynamic to help you keep the action moving and to keep you from getting bogged down in the details. Don't split the party. If the party is split up, turns still pass at the same rate. Each test made and each conflict fought costs a turn, even if the party is in 2 different areas. Turns aren't just time. They are a resource to be managed carefully. If the party is split, neither group can enter the camp or town phase until both groups meet the necessary requirements. Traps and landslides. There's always an exception. If the game master springs a trap on an environmental-based test and multiple characters are required to test individually, it takes a single turn. It's like a conflict that way. You all have to pass an OB4 health test because you've all inhaled a dose of sleeping gas. That costs 1 turn. Instincts. Instincts do not cost a turn on the grind. Players get to roll those dice without advancing the turn tracker. Although note, if you are exhausted, if you want to use your instinct, it still costs a turn. Some spells and invocations do not cost a turn or check to cast or perform, and some do. Each spell and invocation is listed with the time required to cast it. All right. Checks. Events in the camp phase are driven by the players. The camp phase does not use turns, and conditions are not assigned as time passes. Instead, the players spend checks they've accumulated during the adventure phase to make tests to recover, repair, re-equip, regroup, or research. A lot of R's there. Tests in camp are slower paced than those in the adventure phase. They're not moment-to-moment actions, but rather longer activities like cooking off a meal, sleeping off hurts, or drawing a map. When a player spends a check, their friends can help them, even if they don't have any checks themselves. Checks are earned by using traits against yourself, as described in the traits chapter. Once all checks are spent or discarded, the adventure phase recommences. Lifestyle. In town, time slides by a bit more easily. The more conditions you have to recover from, and the more errands you run in town, the longer you spend in town, and the more expensive your bills. This activity represents your character's lifestyle. See the town chapter for more details. In general, recovering from hungry and thirsty, angry and afraid takes a few days of rest. Recovering from exhausted, injured, and sick is a matter of a few weeks. Errands and personal business usually take no more than a week. If you're ever in doubt about exactly how much time should pass, affairs in town always take longer than you expect. During the adventure phase, all characters earn a condition every 4th turn. If they are fresh or have no conditions, they become hungry and thirsty. If they're already hungry and thirsty, they become exhausted. If they're already all those things, they become angry. If they're already all those things, they become sick. If they're already all those things, they suffer an injury. And lastly, if they are already all of those things, if they are injured, sick, angry, exhausted, and hungry, they are made afraid. If they have all 6 of these conditions marked when the grind ticks over, they mark the dead condition. They unceremoniously drop dead from all the abuse and indignities of this wretched life. So, assuming you do nothing, every 4 turns you mark a condition. So after 4 turns, hungry and thirsty. After 8 turns, exhausted. 12 turns, angry. 16 turns, sick. 20 turns, injury. 24 turns, afraid. And on the 28th turn, your character would just drop to the ground dead. That's assuming you didn't gain any other conditions from anything else that went wrong, of course. So the time is ticking. Note that the grind imposes conditions in a different order than on your character sheet to reflect the hardships of this kind of life and to keep you on your toes. The conditions on the character sheet are listed in the order in which they must be recovered from, not the order in which they are imposed by the grind. Extreme grind. If they're bold or foolish, if adventurers go forth in the winter, if they cross a desert or undertake a similar task of superhuman endurance, when adventuring through these extreme environs, they earn a condition every 3 turns instead of every 4. Also, the dead condition can be applied after a character is made exhausted. Light. Adventurers must have light to explore dark places, night-plagued valleys, dank caves, and dark dungeons. In this game, light is a resource that extends to a certain number of characters per life source and is expended over time. There are 3 types of light source referred to in the game: candles, torches, and lanterns. Each provides lights for a different number of characters and lasts for a number of turns. Candles provide light for a single character and last 4 turns. Torches provide light for 2 characters and last for 2 turns. Lanterns provide light for 3 characters and last for 3 turns. Spells, invocations, magical artifacts, and level benefits can act as light sources as well. Most are listed as being equivalent to candles, torches, or lanterns, but be sure to consult the individual entries for the precise rules. So here's a table of the light. So daylight, candle, torch, and lantern. Oh, okay. So torch provides 2 characters in light, but an additional 2 characters in dim light. Characters near a light source, but not covered by it, are in dim light. Dim light is a factor in all tests except riddling. So basically, if you have a party of 4 and you have 1 person with a torch, only 2 of you are in the real light, and the other 2 of you are in dim light. And you can still take all your actions, but for those 2 characters who are in the dim light, then all of their tests are harder, right? Except for riddling. So it's crazy. Like, like you really have to strategize how much light you have and how much, can you afford to keep 2 torches going, right? If you are in complete darkness, one cannot read or draw a map and thus cannot use cartography or scholar skills. Adventurers may only flee, riddle, or argue if they are engaged in a conflict. Darkness is a factor in all tests except riddling. I know turns do not equal time, but I can't help but feel a turn should average around 3 hours to make the conditions feel diegetic and make sense in the fiction. And yet they don't really. I mean, they could take, like it says, I mean, it could be a turn could be 10 minutes, but a turn could also be an entire night's watch, So, 3 hours is in the middle of that. Also note, by the way, there's some notes here about these different light sources. So a candle may be snuffed or blown out at the discretion of the GM, regardless of or in addition to other results. Whereas a torch, not only can it be used as a weapon, but it may be snuffed if dropped or as part of a twist. So the GM can basically say, if it makes sense, he can say the candle goes out. But the torch can only go out as part of a twist. Or if you drop it, it can be snuffed. The lantern is obviously the kind of baller. It can be used as a weapon only once. It requires a flask of oil, though, for fuel. And it can only be doused as part of a twist. So basically, like, if you set your lantern down, it's only going to get doused if a twist occurs, if you fail a test. Whereas if you drop your torch, the GM could just decide it goes out. Under normal circumstances, lighting a candle, torch, or lantern does not require any tests. However, if the adventurers are suddenly plunged into darkness due to an unexpected turn of events, the Game Master may call for a survivalist test to quickly get their light source lit. Failure could mean you earn a condition like afraid. Your heart is pounding as you frantically scrape your flint and steel. Or failure could mean a wicked twist. You drop your tools and can't find them in the pitch black and remain in inky darkness. When camping, we assume adventurers make a fire, which provides light equivalent to a lantern. In general, this should be enough even if there are more than 3 in the group. If you require even more light in your camp, make a survivalist test to collect the provisions. Otherwise, light sources are not consumed during camp. Of course, sometimes you can't afford to have a light going in camp at all. In those cases, keep a dark camp and lose the benefits of having a fire, but remain concealed from danger. Tossing the torch. Sometimes you need to free up a hand in a hurry. Dropping a torch provides dim light for only 2 characters, but no other light. However, be forewarned, the Game Master may snuff a torch on the ground regardless of or addition to other results. Okay. Setting down the lantern. Characters with a lantern may set it down to free up a hand. Once it's on the ground, it provides dim light for 3 characters, but no other lights. If a conflict erupts around that fragile point of light, the Game Master decides the lantern is kicked over and doused, in addition to any other results. Dropping a lantern, causing it to break or spill and go out. No need to carry light in the daylight. Nights in the wilds, forests, and night-draped city streets are considered to be complete darkness, whereas moonlit fields and star-crossed towns are covered in dim light. Unless otherwise noted, areas underground are assumed to be complete darkness. So that's like an entire chapter on light. It's kind of funny. I bought arcane NODs in the Metropolis and the magical ether batteries as well. What's a nod? I don't know what a nod is. I might be showing my naivete here. I don't know what a nod is. All right, conditions. Oh, got it. Okay, so I knew it was some sort of fancy techno term that I didn't know. Our life is not a pleasant one. There are long marches in evil weather, hard work with no rest, and rough treatment from bad characters. All of this can wear us down. Conditions. To represent the toll of life as an adventurer, there are 8 conditions in the game. Fresh, hungry and thirsty, afraid, angry, exhausted, injured, sick, and dead. Fresh. All adventurers start their first adventure happy, healthy, and fed. This is the best condition. When fresh, you add +1 die to all tests, except resources and circles. But if a character suffers any other condition, they are no longer fresh, and the bonus no longer applies. To become fresh once again, a character must return to town, alleviate all other conditions, restore their taxed nature, and pass their lifestyle maintenance test. And if you do all those things, then you leave town refreshed. Otherwise, no. Hungry and thirsty. Being hungry and thirsty can impair adventurers when it's time to step up and face danger. They're distracted by their physical needs. While hungry and thirsty, the team suffers -1 success to its disposition roll in all conflicts. Disposition roll is like how many hit points your side, your team, has in a disposition. Note this penalty counts once, no matter how many in a group are hungry and thirsty. Minimum starting disposition is always 1. Adventurers can alleviate the hungry and thirsty condition by eating and drinking. During the adventure phase, so long as they have just a few moments of relative peace, they can eat rations or drink water or wine to instantly recover from the condition without a test. In camp, adventurers can use scavenger, survivalist, or hunter to acquire food or drink. They can use the cook skill to prepare food and turn it into meals. In town, family, friends, and mentors will feed their kith and kin if they are called upon and able to help. Maybe even an enemy will offer help too. Taverns and certain accommodations in town provide food and drink and thus alleviate this condition when patroned. Without food or drink, adventurers remain grumbly and cranky. Angry. Life as an adventurer can be frustrated. Sometimes their only outlet is to rage against themselves. While angry, adventurers don't think clearly. Players cannot use the beneficial effects of their traits and wises, but they can still use their traits against themselves. So if you're angry, you do not get to use traits or wises, the benefits of traits and wises. At the Game Master's option, being angry can add +1 ob to any test requiring precision or social grace. Skills affected by the angry condition include alchemist, cartographer, commander, cook, dungeoneer, haggler, healer, mentor, lore master, manipulator, orator, pathfinder, persuader, scholar, and survivalist. Recovering from anger. Mastering anger requires a moment to vent or breathe it out, and an ob2 will test during the camp phase or the town phase. If passed, they master their anger and remove the condition. If failed, the anger lingers. Adventurers may test again to recover during the next camp or town phase. Afraid. Adventurers are resilient, but sometimes they overwhelm them with terror. While afraid, adventurers cannot offer help, and they cannot use beginner's luck. However, they can use their nature to test in place of unlearned skills. To recover from being afraid, they have a moment of peace in which they gather their wits and requires an ob3 will test during the camp or town phase. If they pass their test, they alleviate the condition. If they fail the test, they continue to jump at their own section, shadow, and they may test again to recover in the next camp phase. Okay. Exhausted. Facing the uncounted danger takes its toll. Exhaustion can set in. While exhausted, your team suffers -1 success to its disposition roll in all conflicts. This penalty is applied even if only once, even if multiple people are exhausted. This stacks with hungry and thirsty. Additionally, exhaustion also prohibits an adventurer from using their instinct for free. They may still take the action described in the instinct, but it costs a turn and suffers a +1 ob penalty. Shaking off exhaustion requires an ob3 health test during the camp. If they pass, they shrug off the fatigue, and if they fail, it continues. Cloaks, inns, level benefits, and certain invocations can all grant +1 die to recover from exhaustion. In town, staying in a fancy accommodation like the hotel allows one to automatically recover from exhaustion. No need to roll. Weariness. Certain actions are considered more taxing than others. Using a shield, wearing heavy armor, casting a spell, and certain spell effects. Wearisome actions make it difficult to recover from exhaustion. If a character engages in any of these activities during the adventure phase, the Game Master may impose a +1 obstacle penalty to recovery. Carolina dons a suit of plate armor. During the adventure, she then gets into a fight with some kobolds and earns the exhausted condition. When she makes a recovery test during camp, her obstacle number is 4 instead of 3 due to the extra factor from the plate armor. Yikes. All right, now we're getting to the real stuff. Injured. Adventurers put their lives on the line every day and are injured for their efforts. These injuries are difficult things. While they do not take them out of the action, they reduce their effectiveness. This implies a -1 die penalty to nature checks, will checks, health checks, and all skill checks. It stacks with the sick condition. While injured, an adventurer is at serious risk. If a test involves the risk of physical harm, the Game Master may apply the dead condition to an injured character as the result of a failed test. The game master is obligated to inform the player that death is on the line before the player rolls the dice. All right. Luke says, Baron is going to try to make the leap over the chasm. Thor arches an eyebrow and inquires, isn't Baron injured? If you fail, you could miss the jump, fall in, and disappear. Recovering from injury. To recover from injury, you have to make an OB4 health test to overcome the pain and discomfort. If successful, remove the penalty and alleviate the condition. If failed, the penalty remains until you seek the attention of a healer or grits their teeth. Okay, so if you fail that, you either have to get healed or you need to grit your teeth because it was obviously too bad for you just to tough it out. Treatment for injury. A healer may treat an injury and remove the condition outside of the standard recovery order. Treatment takes place in camp or in town. The obstacle for the healer is based on the type of injury. Bumps and bruises, 2. Sword cuts, broken bones, 3. Burns, 4. If the healer succeeds, remove the penalty and condition. If the healer fails the test, the injury heals poorly and leaves a bad scar. Remove the condition and reduce by one die the health, nature, or health-based skill of rating of the game master's choice. Erase all advances for that character's skill or ability. Rough. If the healer fails, they heal you, but you get a bad scar and you permanently get a -1 to one of your skills. Grit your teeth. If treatment is not an option, at any point after being injured, a player can opt to have their character grit their teeth and eat the penalty. Cauterize the wound with a hot iron, drink some wine, and get back on your feet. When a player decides to grit their teeth, the game master reduces health, nature, or a health-based skill by -1 permanently and removes the condition. Erase all passes and failures for that affected ability or skill. A player character can grit their teeth at any time before making a roll. So, injury is rough, and it can, if you are injured, you potentially could die. However, you can basically at will choose to basically grit your teeth and, like, you know, Rambo, you know, Judge Dredd, you know, cauterize the wound, stitch it up yourself, you know, throw some wine on it and grit your teeth through the pain. And that eliminates the injured condition, but you lose a permanent point from one of your skills. What an interesting decision. So sick, being out in the cold, wet, exposed to elements, adventurers are always in risk of staying ill. While sick, a character cannot practice, learn from a mentor, or advance a skill or ability. Do not log any tests for advancement. So when you're sick, you cannot advance. In addition, you get a -1 die penalty to nature, will, health, and skill tests, and it stacks with the injured condition. So if you are injured and sick, you're at -2 dice to all of your skills. Rough. While sick, a character is at serious risk. If the circumstances of a test involve sickness, disease, poison, madness, or grief, the game master may apply the dead condition to any sick character as a result of a test. They are obligated to inform the player that death is on the line. To fight off sickness requires an obstacle 3 will test during the camp or town phase. If successful, they fade and you alleviate the condition. If failed, the sickness condition remains until you seek the attention of a healer or until they sweat out the fever. So this is very similar to the way injured works. The obstacle for the healer is based off of the sickness. OB4 for a common illness, OB5 for a virulent disease, OB6 for poison. If the healer fails this test, they remove it, but you suffer a -1 die. And then additionally, you can sweat out the fever. At any time, you can lose the sick condition by sweating out the fever, but the game master will reduce one of your will or will-based skills or nature by 1 permanently. Dead. Sometimes characters pay the ultimate price. Dead. You cannot help. You cannot test. You cannot use traits or wises in any way. And all your skills or abilities are reduced to 0. Well, good to know. Can you gain skill checks while you have the dead condition? No. Look at that. You can't. Well, no, because you can't test. You can't help. And if you can't test and you can't help and you can't use traits and you can't use wises, then you cannot gain skill checks. See the terrible price in the Lore Master's Manual for rules on potentially surviving death. That's from the optional rule book. If a rating or skill is reduced to 0, you cannot test that ability while you suffer from the condition. You cannot benefit from or grant help or even spend persona points. However, you can use nature. It is possible to suffer from multiple conditions at once. A character could be angry and exhausted. They could be sick and injured. However, individual conditions are singular. You cannot be exhausted twice or angry 3 times. Once they're angry, they're angry. Every 4th turn, you get a condition from the grind. And remember, the Game Master can apply a condition to your character if you fail a roll. However, if they do so, then you succeed at the objective for that test. Varg is swimming through a water-filled chamber. He fails his Dungeoneer skill test. The Game Master opts to allow him to traverse the chamber, but Varg is made sick from swallowing water and nearly drowning. And there are some suggestions. Hungry and thirsty may be applied as a result of any failed test. Warrior needs food badly. For Orator, or Manipulator, Persuader test, maybe apply angry. For Hunter, Pathfinder, Scout, Health, Scheming or Escaping, apply afraid, exhausted, injured. For trade skills like armor or labor, apply angry or exhausted. For academic skills like scholar, alchemist, cartographer, apply exhausted. All that research and reading is hard work. For fighter or other tests involving danger, apply afraid or injured. For tests involving the risk of physical harm, apply the dead condition if the character already has the injured condition. For tests involving sickness, poison, or mental decay, apply the dead condition if the character is already sick. So, being sick and being injured is a real deal. And you should also note this game doesn't have hit points. So really, the only way that you can die in this game is if you're injured or sick, and the GM says, hey, this test, if you fail, I'm going to apply the dead condition. And even then, you could choose to sweat out the fever or grit your teeth. So there's kind of a way, in a weird way, you can pretty much, as long as you're willing. Now, granted, you might have a player who says, I don't want to take any penalties to my skills. I'm going to risk it. I'm going to roll the dice. And then they could, roll low and then your character dies. But you make a choice. You didn't have to do that. And then you die. All right. When you apply the dead condition, your character passes the test and then perishes. Nice. Let's see. We already read about this. You reap what you sow, redo. Yeah, it's just telling us this, right? If people help you with your roll and you get a condition because of that roll, they get a condition as well. It's a lesser condition, but they get a condition. Like if you get injured, they might get exhausted, right? And again, conditions play a big role in conflicts. They can affect disposition, obstacles, and the die rolls, and they can be applied in compromises. And this is interesting. While any member of your team is hungry and thirsty, the team suffers -1 success to its disposition rolls. This counts once, no matter how many of you are hungry and thirsty. And it's this interesting situation where it's like, because it only applies once, it's kind of like, if we're not all going to alleviate hungry and thirsty, there's kind of no reason for us to all alleviate hungry and thirsty. There's an interesting tactical element there that I think is kind of interesting. Blah, blah, blah. Dead characters cannot help, or aid. Recovery. While conditions are burdensome, it is possible to recover from them when you are in camp or town. The recovery rules describe the obstacles. Note, a character can only make 1 recovery test per condition per phase, and town is a phase. Your character could literally go back to town, exhausted and angry. And in town, if you fail your checks to resolve or get rid of exhausted and angry, or you're too cheap and you don't want to pay for the nice room at the hotel, which will automatically eliminate exhausted, you might leave town still angry and exhausted. Town was a brutal 4 days or 5 days in town, right? It only made you more pissed off, and you're completely beat by town because you had to sleep in some crappy stable. This is not a situation where it's like, oh, go back to town, everybody's at full, and the hit points restore overnight. No, it is tough in Torchbearer to heal to full. It actually is pretty tough, in my experience, my limited experience. So it's really like an ongoing game of misery. All right. All right. Conditions are pernicious. You must relieve them in the order presented on the character sheet. You have to, you can't restore injured and sick unless you remove exhausted. And you can't remove exhausted unless you remove afraid. And you can't remove afraid unless you remove angry. And you can't remove any of your conditions if you're hungry and thirsty. You have to remove hungry and thirsty first. So if your character is both angry and exhausted, you must assuage your anger before you can benefit from rest. Otherwise, you're just tossing and turning endlessly, restlessly in your bed. Dead supersedes all other conditions. You must recover from being dead before you can recover from anything else. So it's like Blades in the Dark or Scum and Villainy, non-deep cuts in that respect. Yeah, exactly, GM Scott. I mean, I think there's this idea that, the conditions sort of linger on in that way. Yeah, so it is very similar to that respect, yeah. You cannot make recovery tests during the adventure phase. You can eat and drink to recover from being hungry and thirsty because no test is required, and you can receive the benefit of invocations, cleric spells, to alleviate conditions. Healing tests to alleviate sickness and injuries are performed in camp and town, not the adventure phase. No treat wounds after fighting. You can make recovery tests in camp at the cost of 1 check per test. You can recover in town using accommodations. Some facilities provide free tests or even automatic recovery. Otherwise, every recovery test increases your lifestyle cost by 1. Some cleric spells alleviate conditions and may do so regardless of order. Recovery tests are never subject to the twist and condition rules. If they pass the test, it's removed. If they fail, they continue to suffer from it. It doesn't keep getting worse. Hungry and thirsty is the most common condition. Adventurers are threatened with it every 4 turns when they're out in the shit. To recover from it, they eat or drink. Whenever a character has a few minutes to rest and collect their thoughts, regardless of whether they're in venture, camp, or town, they can consume a portion of food or water and alleviate the condition. The act of eating and drinking does not cost a turn or a check or add to lifestyle cost, provided food or drink is available. Adventurers cannot eat or drink if they're on the run, under pressure, in the middle of climbing a cliff, etc. Our thirsty adventurers flee from an ogre, only to stumble into a round room containing 2 hovering, glowing orbs. Can we drink here? Asked Joss. There's no time. The orbs react to you. You need to flee or act. Fuck. F. Run. We run. Joss knows the group is beat up and needs a moment to rest. Meryl consults their map and manages to navigate the group to an empty hallway. Luke intones, there are bloodstains, bits of fur, and gobbets of flesh here, but otherwise it appears empty. Can we rest here and drink and eat? Luke consults his notes to make sure there are no immediate dangers or obstacles in this area. It seems all clear. Yes, go ahead. Everyone removes a portion of food or drink from their inventory and removes their hungry and thirsty conditions. All right, so that is conditions. And then lastly, we have conflict, which is definitely the more involved things here. And we get into fate. I do want to skip conflict really quick, and I want to get to fate here, because this is like the reward section. I do want to read this a little bit. At the end of a session of Torchbearer, we reward the adventurers for their deeds. Players can earn rewards for the way they played their characters, fate and persona. Rewards are accrued in points. There are 2 types of points, fate points and persona points. These are used to modify dice rolls and activate wises. The group distributes rewards at the end of a session. When the session is winding down, usually after camp or town phase, or during a break in the action, go around the table and read aloud your belief, creed, goal, and instinct. If the group agrees that the criteria is met, then you earn the applicable reward. Fate points. There are 4 ways to earn fate points. Players may satisfy each of the following criteria once per session. Act on your belief. When a character stands up and takes action in a manner driven by their belief, they earn 1 fate point. This action can manifest in a test, a good idea, or even an instance of strong roleplay. The important distinction is the character risked themselves to fight for what they believe. Characters cannot earn this reward and the playing against a belief award in the same session. It's one or the other. Mentioning that you have a related belief. It's not enough to talk about a belief to earn this reward, nor is it enough to offer a line or 2 of dialogue that incorporates a belief. Characters must take action driven by a belief to earn this reward, right? You can't just be like, I also believe everybody deserves a second chance. all right, cool. I did the thing. No, it's not enough just to talk about it. You have to take action. If you work towards your goal, making a test towards achieving a goal but not accomplishing it earns a fate point. Characters may also earn this reward if they worked towards their goal, but someone else in the party is the one who accomplishes it. One cannot earn this reward and the accomplish your goal in the same session. Benefit from your instinct. If an instinct grants a test and the outcome benefits their allies, they earn a fate point. Gallows humor. If a character offers a grim assessment of their fate while staring down certain death, they are rewarded with 1 fate point. Gallows humor is for dry comments that punctuate moments of improbable survival or add a wry grin to moments of terror and bloodshed. A sharp crack in the face of the Grim Reaper. All right. About that one, but. All right. Persona points. It's typical to earn 1 or 2 persona points per session, but skilled and lucky players can earn up to 4 in a single session. If you play against your belief, if a character acts against their belief in a dramatic fashion, if they make a decision in the game that's counter to what they believe, and they let everyone know about their inner struggle through the performance of their character, they earn a persona point. You cannot earn this and acting on your belief in the same session. It's one or the other. If you actually accomplish a goal during the session, you earn a persona point. Crisis. During play, characters will reach moments of crisis when they must decide either to benefit themselves or to fight for something bigger than personal gain. A crisis always costs something: blood, respect, trust, wealth, social standing, or power. Moments to advocate for oneself to come out ahead are represented by beliefs and goals. Moments to advocate for a higher cause are crises of creed. A player earns a persona point for an internal crisis if their character stands up for their creed in a moment of crisis. If their character's creed is violated, voided, or broken, and they demonstrate their inner turmoil born from this revelation. Characters do not need to succeed, but they must take clear, unequivocal action motivated by their creed to qualify for this reward. Kajar's creed is, immortals and Jotnar are one and the same, no different from one another. When at a shrine to the lords of chaos and law, Christopher decides to have Kajar tempt fate and propitiate the Jotun of chaos, despite the fact that Kajar is not much of a theologian. As a result, Valley, the Jotun of slaughter, curses him. I mean, this is a bunch of Nordic stuff I don't quite understand, but all right. Kajar earns a persona point for playing his creed and putting himself and his friends at risk before it. Basically, he pisses off the gods because he believes that he and the gods are one and the same or something. MVP. The player who made the critical role of the session earns the MVP persona point. The group decides which player gets the MVP award. Only one player can be the MVP award. You cannot earn MVP and team worker. Meryl had her magician, Cisneros, cast Thread of Friendship on the spider Utan. The spell saved the group from being devoured, and at the end of the session, Meryl is awarded MVP by the group. Occasionally, a session won't have an MVP. That's up for the group to decide. In that case, do not distribute this reward. Team worker. The player who worked the hardest to keep the group together and in good shape earns 1 persona point for their efforts. This reward goes to the ones who helped despite the risks, who spent all their gear for their mates and sacrificed their goals for their companions. The group decides only one player can get it, and you can't get both. Playing Ulrich, Thor sacrifices his rope, his torches, and his water to keep the group moving. During camp, he mixes poultices to help alleviate conditions, and when it's time to explore a water-filled cave, he volunteers. At the end of the session, the group awards him with the team worker point. All right. Spending fate. There are 3 ways to spend fate point: for luck, for wises, and for earning experience. Luck. A player may spend 1 fate point for luck after they've rolled. Pick up 1 new die for every 6 that you've rolled. Roll these dice and count new successes. If more 6s come up, pick up new dice for each 6 and keep going. So for a fate point, you can make your roll explode after the fact. Deeper understanding. A player may spend 1 fate point to re-roll a worm, a single failed die, on a roll related to one of their wises. Remember, wises are very specific knowledge, very specific skill that you're good at. When using this effect, they exclaim, "Aha!" and gesture that they now understand everything. They may use deeper conjunction in deeper understanding in conjunction with other rewards. Use this option before spending fate to re-roll your 6s. Synergy. When helping another player on a test, the helper may spend 1 fate point before the dice are cast to learn from the experience. Players may use the synergy effect while helping on a skill, ability, or beginner's luck. If the player rolling the dice passes the test, then the helper gets to mark a passed test for advancement for the skill or ability, which they helped, not necessarily the one being tested. And if they fail, they get to mark a failed test. Okay. If a player uses synergy in a tie and the acting player opts for a tiebreaker roll, they do not log a test for advancement. They may opt to retract 1 fate point and return it to their current total. However, they may also opt to keep the fate point on the roll and mark a test for the ability or skill using the tiebreaker roll, even though they can't lend a helping die. Okay, that's a very niche thing, but okay. Persona points. There are 3 ways to spend persona points: for advantage, for wises, and to channel your nature. Advantage. A player may spend up to 3 persona points on a single roll before rolling the dice. Each persona point adds +1 die to the roll. Simple, easy peasy. Channeling your nature. A player may spend a persona point to channel their character's nature into a roll and perform a heroic deed. When channeling nature, add dice equal to your current nature rating to any ability or skill test, except for circles or resources. If it's within your nature, there is no further cost or penalty. If it's outside your nature and you pass the test, your nature gets taxed by 1. If you channel your nature and fail a test not covered by your nature's trait descriptors, the nature rating is temporarily taxed by the margin of failure. Rough. So if your nature is 5, right, then if you channel your nature, you get to add 5 dice to your die roll, which is a ton. But if it's outside of your nature and you pass the test, then your nature temporarily goes from 5 down to 4. If it's outside of your nature and you fail the test, your nature goes down by 1 for every margin that you failed by. So if the obstacle was 6 and you add these 5 extra dice to your skill and you only get 3 successes, then you failed by 3, your nature of 5 gets reduced down to 2. And lastly, of course, a player may spend 1 persona point to roll a number of dice equal to the number of failed dice that you generated from a test if it's related to one of your wises. When using this effect, they must declare, of course, and indicate that they were wrong before, but have it all correct now. So for a persona point, you can basically re-roll all your failures if it matches to one of your wises. So wises are very powerful, but you really need some rewards for that. As you level and increase, you can spend, as a character's level increases as you spend your rewards. So in order for your character to level up in this game, you have to earn persona points and you have to earn fate points, but then you have to spend fate points and spend persona points. And after you've spent enough persona points and spent enough fate points, then your character levels up. Death and rewards. If a character is killed while holding unspent rewards, the rewards are given to the player's next character, up to a maximum of 3 fate and 3 persona points. Well, that's nice. All right. And that is the end of book 1 of the Scholar's Guide, because this is safe havens and other assumptions. This talks about the camp phase and what happens when we go into camp and what kind of camp we have. And do we light a torch or not, and how to set watch, and camp events generator and breaking camp. It's also important to note that time does not pass in turns during camp, and upon breaking camp, the turn count resets back to 1 for the next adventure phase. So even if you were about to take a condition, you go to camp, it resets. And then there's a section here about town phase and all the stuff that happens in town and all the different locations you can go to in town. Leveling up and staying at the inn or going to the market. Not reading that today. How to spend your treasure in town and paying your bill in town. Do you have friends or parents in town? And then respite, which used to be called the winter phase, is like every 10 sessions you kind of do like a respite, which is like a lot of time passes. Nice. And then we get into designing an adventure. So that's the third book. So the second book is much shorter. Hey, happy goldfish. Oh, it is great. It's great role-playing Debbie. Well, welcome. Hey, what's going on? Been a minute. It has been a hot minute, buddy. Thank you. Any intent on doing a class analysis of the exemplar? Well, I'm definitely going to do War of the Immortals. I definitely want to cover the mythic rules. I don't know if I'm going to do the Animist and the Exemplar. I mean, we can. You know what? I'll say this. We'll probably do the War of Immortals stream, and we'll probably have a tip goal and a super chat goal to do a look at the Animist and the Exemplar. And if we reach those goals, or if the patrons really want to see that, obviously, of course, we'll do that. But if we can get some support for that, then we'll do that. What's up, Keith? Good to see you. I'm getting Burning Wheel Gold for Christmas, so I'm interested in this game. I mean, yeah. So this game is Burning Wheel Light, right? Burning Wheel is even more, involved in this. So, so what do we have here in this game? So what we have in this game is a very procedural game, right? That has a lot of complexity and little moving parts to it. All right. It's a very, what some people would call a very board gamey game. Now, granted, you'll see throughout the text, it talks about we have to describe what our character is doing in actions. We can't just say, I use skill. In fact, actually, you have to describe what your character is doing in the fiction of the game. And it's the game master who decides what skill you're going to roll based off of the way you described your action. There's an idea here of, like, if you want to use a certain action, you need to learn how to describe what you're doing with intent. I don't think the GM is encouraged to be a complete asshole about this, but at the same time, you need to establish yourself with the fiction. And a lot of elements are about playing to your character's performance, playing to your character's beliefs, their goals, right? And the way half the way that you earn rewards is by playing into your beliefs and playing into your goals and your creeds, or playing against them in dramatic fashion. So again, the whole point of the game, which is very complex, is to create outcomes that lead to storytelling, right? This is not Torchbearer. This game system is not trying to simulate the world of Torchbearer at all. I mean, and nothing exemplifies this more than the fact that turns are a resource and it's a pacing thing, right? Another way to think of it is, in a movie, right? In a movie, the runtime of the movie keeps going towards the end of the movie, even if we're showing two characters, right, doing things at the same time, right? Because, if we spend 5 minutes watching Captain America do something, and then the scene cuts to Iron Man doing something for 5 minutes, and even if the idea is that Iron Man and Captain America were doing something at the same time, the runtime of the movie still ran for 10 minutes, not 5. We didn't go to split screen. There is nothing more fun than the struggle of making every check a deception. Well, again, there's an element here to Torchbearer, which is definitely, I will admit, this is not a game for newbies. There's an element of Torchbearer of, like, get better, learn to get good, learn to, I'm not saying adversarial. Okay. But, like, even that thing there, like, there was that section called, like, never volunteer, like here, if a player describes their character's actions in relation to an obstacle, if they volunteer for a task, or they lay out a highly detailed plan that doesn't involve risking the character, they make the test. There's no backing out. So it's one of those situations where it's kind of like, if you describe, you're like, well, I don't know. I'll go over and check, I'll go over and take a look at the door. And then you're like, okay, you're making a test. And you're like, wait, no. I didn't say that. You're like, well, nope, you said that, now you could definitely huddle up and discuss your options and come up with a good plan before describing your actions to the game master. But there's an element here of this game of slight adversarialness where, you want some of that, tension, in order to promote good storytelling, right? And the other thing too, which I think is like the secret sauce of this game, is this game will really grind your characters down. And you could absolutely die, but you can kind of only really die if you want to. I mean, it's still a random dice roll, and you could still say YOLO. I'm going to, you're like, I'm going to continue to hold. My character is injured. All right. And you go, but I'm going to try to drive off the gnolls. And I go, okay, you're going to make a fighter test against the gnolls. If you fail, you're going to die because you're already injured. And the player goes, yep, I'm totally fine with those. I'm willing to accept that consequence. And they roll the dice, they roll bad, and they fail, and they die. That totally happens. But remember, in that point, I'm getting the player that option to say, okay, I'm going to reconsider what I'm going to do. They could choose to grit their teeth and eliminate the injury before they go into fight against the gnolls. Now, granted, that's going to do a permanent -1 to one of their skills. But, it's one of those things where it's like, it's designed to really make your characters struggle and then see what comes out of that struggle, not to like challenge you to like, see if you can, beat some arbitrary challenge. Keith, would you allow third-party person descriptions at your table? Yeah, the game says not to. I think that's totally unreasonable. Like, I would totally allow third-person descriptions. I mean, I think the game is probably unaffected by that in any stretch of the imagination. So I would totally allow third-party descriptions. That's where the GM, in a more informal context, helps the player out, throws them a bone. Deception is you lying. How are you going to lie here? Oh. Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah. No. And by the way, I even though this game has this adversarial context, I, as a GM, am always going to be like, look, I want to work with the players here. What I don't want to do, which I think is something that is missing or is lacking in some of these games nowadays, is we have gotten to a point where, like, with our Pathfinder games and our D&D 5e games, we've gotten to a point where the rules themselves are pretty transparent, right? Like, everybody knows what the rules are. And it's kind of hard to find something that's broken except for, I found some combination of feats and abilities that clearly weren't intended, and learning that gave me some sort of advantage, right? Basically, I'm not saying you're cheating, but you're kind of cheating, right? It's something ridiculous, like, that nobody realized, like, it's like, it's clearly something that's stupid, like the peasant light speed bucket brigade thing, which apparently they address in the DMG, which is absurd to me, in the new DMG. Anyways, from 5e. But there's really no idea of playing the game and getting better at it, right? And like, actually not because you chose the right feats or some stupid build, but I mean, like, actually learning like how this game works. Like, what's the math of this game? And then the game saying, you're going to play this game badly at the beginning, but if you stick with it and you learn how the game works, you're going to start to figure things out. You're going to start to piece together little heuristics. You're going to start to piece together little strategies that's going to make the game, better. In some ways, it's like a classic example of this. In some ways, it's like Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Now, I don't think they intended to do this. This is actually a knock against Pathfinder 2, but it's also a pro thing in Pathfinder 2. Pathfinder 2 says, hey, if you make an attack, you get to make your attack roll. But if you make a second attack roll, you suffer from this thing called multiple attack penalty, and you have a -5 to your attack roll. And hey, if you make a third attack, you're going to suffer a -10 to your attack roll. And a lot of people read that, and then they play the game, and they make a third attack roll. They're attack. What they don't realize is that is, in the context of the game, that is utterly a waste of time. It is utterly useless. And in fact, against some enemies, making the second attack is fairly worthless and fairly useless. Your chance of success might be really low. If you needed a 13 or higher to hit with your first attack, now you need an 18 or higher to hit with your second attack, which is, only a 15% chance of success. That's a pretty low chance of success for an entire action. So part of the, fun of Pathfinder 2 is kind of figuring that out and then going, oh, okay, I shouldn't be attacking 3 times. I maybe shouldn't even be attacking 2 times. I should be using my actions to do other things that don't involve this multiple attack penalty. What can I do, and how can I build my character? Now, Pathfinder 2 ostensibly is aimed at a, hey, welcome to our game, and welcome, you're brand new. And our game is very balanced, right? Because there's this concern about balance and being fair in Pathfinder 2. And that is kind of at odds with learn to get good. But, I know that my group, that was kind of what our Pathfinder 2 combat and tactics thing was all about, right? Which was like learning how these, situations and how these rules mechanic interact. Well, Torchbearer and Burning Wheel are that on a very extreme scale. And not everybody wants to actually, believe it or not, a lot of people don't want to learn how to actually play these games, and that's okay, because they're just here to drink a beer and eat pretzels and, roll dice, kick names, take ass. And that's fine. I mean, go. There are plenty of games out there that are really good for that style of play. I think 5e, near the top. Pathfinder 2, I think, requires a little bit more cerebral processing because there's a little bit more moving parts and there's some other stuff. But Pathfinder 2 has all these elements of balance and, trying to prevent you from making too bad of a choice or too good of a choice. But a game like Torchbearer is a game that rewards you for investing in it. And I'm not trying to say like you need to go home and study for it like it's a midterm or a final. I'm just saying that even the designers say you're not going to get this game right away and it's going to be bad. And then you're going to get better at the game, not because your character gets broken stats, because it doesn't really happen in this game. There's no hit points. There's no, even when you gain levels, it's not like you gain more hit points or new conditions. And so, really, it's you, the player, and your player character to a certain extent, but really you, the player, who's getting better, who's learning how to use the rules. And so, it's a great example of this would be like a game like chess, which obviously there's a learning curve. You have to learn how the pieces work. But then once you do that, there's this whole other realm of actually learning strategies and tactics and, how to open and develop your pieces and pinning and forking and, all these other things. And then beyond that, even, higher, crazier, strategies for people who are way better at chess than I could ever hope to be. And there's this whole depth to the game that allows you to just keep investing in it and learning and getting better at it. And while that is happening in Torchbearer, unlike a chess game, because in that respect, chess and Torchbearer are very similar. Complex games, there's somebody playing against you. They're trying to make you make tough decisions, right? They want to sacrifice your pieces. They want to push you into a situation, right? It's very similar. It's not the most complex rule set, but it's fairly complex. But there's a lot of depth in those rules and in those mechanics. The difference between chess and Torchbearer is in Torchbearer, you play chess, but then when the knight takes the bishop, that's part of the story, right? That's you going, okay, the knight took bishop. And why? Because the pawn opened it up. All right, so like the peasants, right, rebel against the religious order, right, and the priests are no longer able to rely on that. And then the knightly order comes in, and they're seen as sort of a populist movement, right? And the peasants support the knights moving in and driving out the clergy, who they see as corrupt and vindicated, right? Like that is the equivalent of Torchbearer. You're playing a chess, but then using the moves of the chess game to turn it into a story. Now, that's a very rough metaphor, but fundamentally, to me, that is what's happening with a game like Torchbearer. It is a sort of a complex, deep game that lends itself to storytelling and role playing through its mechanics, right? They're inextricably intertwined. Here we go. Ty says, this is happening across the board, even in video gaming. In multiplayer mode, people don't want to actually get better. They just want to hack and cheat, etc. And Ty, there was a great video. I don't know if we did a stream about it, but there was a great video I saw years ago from one of those game designer conferences about video games. But they were talking about the distinction between games where you have to earn your skill versus games where the game itself just gives you the skill. And probably the best example of this is a fighting game, like Smash Brothers or Mortal Kombat or something, where you actually have to get good at the game. You have to get good at fighting in order to do the cool moves and do the cool stuff. And then on the opposite side, you have quick time events, right? Where your character in the game is going to do some awesome parkour flip, put their chain around the giant's neck, leap down his back, rip his neck off with the chain, stick the axe into his head, whip it around, hit one of the other oncoming giants with it, knock him off of the platform. He gets impaled on a spike. But what the player is doing is hitting triangle, hitting square when the square pops up on the screen, hitting square again, hitting triangle again. I had to hit circle that time, right? So quick time events are this idea of a simple game that allows the player character to, do all of this awesome kick-ass stuff. Whereas like a fighting game, if you suck at a fighting game, your character on the screen is also going to be, that's all your character is going to do. The other person's throwing Hadoukens and doing fatalities and babalities and all these other crazy weird combo moves. And your character's just, So there's this kind of disconnect. Now, a lot of people sit down to play a video game and they say, I already went to work this week. I don't want to have to put in the time just to get good enough to earn this game's story, And to be fair, video games used to not really have a story, right? Mario didn't really have a story. Mortal Kombat, the video game, did not have a story. The game's purpose was to be mastered, right? The game existed to test your skill. And the enjoyment that you got out of a Mario game was that you learned how to the level and you learned how to, use your jumping and timing, and that you beat the game. The achievement was for you, the person. But so many video games now, the enjoyment from the video game, oftentimes for a lot of people and for a lot of games, comes from the story. And it comes from the narration, and it comes from the voice acting, and it comes from the cutscenes. And so now you have this weird situation because now the game is trying to do two things. The game is trying to give you a story narrative experience that you're enjoying, but also trying to give you a game that you're supposed to enjoy as well. But now if you put a barrier of entry and say, you don't get to see this story that you want to see, it's like I paid to get into the movie, but now you're telling me I need to get good and be good at the game in order to access that story. And that is a very polarizing thing. And clearly there are games out there that have, gone the opposite way and have leaned really heavily into the skill. And the Elden Rings, the Dark Soul games are probably at the highest point of that. But I contend that those games, while they do test skill, in some ways they're a lot like a roguelike. And what they're really testing is your patience, right? And how many times you're willing to die and learn from your mistakes until you can just memorize a pattern and then beat the boss. As opposed to actually getting good at the game. Now, I've never played those games, so I don't want to say. Maybe there are people who are like really good at those games, and they could literally go in and play a new version of that game and kill all the boss monsters without ever dying because they're so good at it. In which case, awesome. All right, Will, take care. We'll probably be wrapping up soon, Will, so you're not going to miss too much. So, thanks for hanging out. Spamming block and MK3 taught me a lot how to survive a mosh pit at the thrash metal shows. There you go. Beowulf, please. Yeah, I mean, it honestly, Keith, a lot of times it is it's very cringe to see people role play in first person. So I'm a big believer in sort of combining it. I like to think of it like a passage from a book, right? Like there's like a description, a line of text, like a line of dialogue, and then maybe a little bit more description, So I might say something like, Jacord, my character, right? Like, or I might say but like, I might say like, Jacord goes over and he stands in front of them defiantly shouting down at them, that he will not, flee this place. He will hold the line, and I said, as my ancestors did. And I say that part in character, but then like the rest of it is kind of just like part of the passage. So yeah. I don't know why this game has captured my attention very heavily. and I'm interested to see how well it plays out. Derek, how many times have you played Torchbearer, and how were those experiences at the table? Keith, I have played Torchbearer 3 times, and once with my my core. Like when I say 3 times, I mean like 3 attempts. Once at 2 times it was at Gen Con, so it was like a one-shot kind of session, which wasn't great. I mean, the mechanics worked fine and it was fun, but I don't really think the game works as a one-shot. Full stop. Then I tried to play it with my home group, and I don't know if we made it through the 2nd session or even into the 3rd. We played more than one, but I don't know if we played a 3rd. And they hated it. They hated it for a lot of reasons. They did not like they didn't like a lot of things. They didn't like the conflict system. They wanted to play on a battle grid with minis. Everybody wanted to get their own turn. They didn't want to work as a group. I think they just didn't like the conflict system, period. I think some of them didn't like the inventory system. I don't think they really had a problem with the turns and the grind. Although a lot of people I've heard do have a problem with that. There's a lot of hurdles. I'm not going to lie. It's not an easy sell. But for me, I'm less concerned with simulating an accurate portrayal of dungeon delving in proper chronological time. And I'm more interested in creating an environment, right, where people have to make tough decisions. See, the moment you say, hey, yeah, there's 4 people in the party. Everyone could take an action if you want, but that's 4 turns, and that means that everybody becomes hungry and thirsty after the 4th person goes. Once you create this limitation, it's not even really a limitation, it's just a cost. Once you say, look, anytime anybody does something, now every decision that you make is an important decision, and it facilitates group discussion, not necessarily in character. I mean, out of character, table chatter, as they say it in the book. What do we need to accomplish here? And even meta reasons, right? Like, does somebody need a check to pass or fail on one of their skill checks so that they can level up? Is somebody trying to do something with their belief or their creed so that they can get some points at the end of the session, right? There's a lot of meta concerns that come into this as well. And that can lead to a situation where the party decides, hey, we're going to let Keith's wizard attempt this, check that he's not really that good at. Even though we have somebody else in the party who is actually better at it, we're going to let Keith's wizard do it. And the reason we're letting Keith's wizard do it is because he just needs one more test to get that skill. And then he'll be way better at it going forward. And everybody understands the risk. You're more likely to fail. And that's going to generate a twist that could generate conditions, which could grind the group down. But, this is part of the fun of the game. Now, the challenge, so that's you playing Torchbearer, the game. The challenge is, okay, why did that happen? Right? It's happening. We're moving our pawn. The pawn is taking bishop. Right? Keith's wizard is doing the health test instead of, Jackal the fighter. Why? Right? It's not enough to just say we're doing this mechanically. We need to make it work. And then it becomes this collaboration between the GM and the players and everybody at the table. And, try to figure out, like, why does this happen? Like, what's the reason for this wizard who's going to go and take this action instead of the fighter? And part of the fun of the challenge of the game is the role-playing challenge. Make that make sense. Make that make sense. And, of course, sometimes some groups might make fun of it. Some groups might, come up with a totally reasonable reason. But again, especially like maybe the wizard goes to do it, but the fighter helps the wizard. And it's like, the fighter's been working with him at camp and he knows that he needs the practice and he needs to know that he can do this on his own. And so I say, hey, why don't you take the lead on this climb? And the wizard goes, me? He goes, don't worry. I'll tell you which rocks are going to collapse or not, but you got this one. And the wizard goes, okay, I got this, right? Like the mechanics lead to the role playing, which I think is really, really interesting. I can't help but wonder, though, if you did allow everyone one action during a turn, how would that really change the game? It would, I think, completely destroy the game. Basically, also Beowulf, it would create the massive. It would create the player powered by the apocalypse problem, because now if 4 people take an action during one turn, and 4 people fail, then you have to create 4 twists or 4 conditions, which could potentially affect multiple characters, all in a single turn. So it would just explode the negative consequence factor to an absurd degree. So yeah, well, I mean, I don't even know what that means. What does 4 times as twisty mean? I mean, a twist is a twist. So no, I think it would fundamentally destroy the game, or destroy the intent of the game, which is that you want that, I mean, put another way, I don't think this does this, but there's a psychology element to it. So I don't think Shadow Dark does this, but I think there's a psychological element to this that does work. So, Shadow Dark has this idea in the game called real-time torches. And that is every hour of at the table time, your torch burns out and you have to light a new one. Now, your torches might also burn out in the game world because, an hour or 2 hours passed in the game world. But even at the table, if only 5 minutes passed in the game world, but at the table, you've been spending an hour dicking around, your torch burns out, you have to burn another one. Now, torches aren't so rare that this is really a big issue or deal. And in fact, when we played Shadow Dark at Origins with some patrons, I used an egg timer that was, I think, 10 minutes. And I set it out in front of my GM screen. And every 10 minutes, they burned through a torch. So that was a lot more tension-filled. Made them want to push, push, push. But even if you use the 1 hour thing, it still gives this feeling at the table especially for people who are maybe not as grognardy as me or people like me, of being like, guys, we gotta, the clock is ticking. In my normal D&D game, we could spend 4 hours just discussing in character what's going to happen. And sure, in the game world, only a few minutes pass. But in this game, there's this kind of like, as we're talking, the torch is burning. And it creates this impetus that time is a precious resource. For Torchbearer, time is a precious resource. Turns are a precious resource. And the party doesn't get to just do everything that they want to do. And they can't just all go and do their own thing. I mean, they can, but that costs something. And I think that's really awesome. The other thing, Beowulf, that this does is it means that whether your group has 5 people or 2 people or 3 people, it doesn't fundamentally change the game. If everybody got a turn per turn and you had a 5-person party, then they would be 5 times as potent and capable as a group that only had 2 or 3 people. Now, that might be true in real life. 5 people can get more done than 3 people. But as a game, I don't want to necessarily create a scenario where you have to have a big group, otherwise you're fucked. So I like that regard. Now, granted, there's certain advantages still to having a bigger group because you have more people to choose from. But at the same time, there's also factors in the game that are penalized by having a larger group. But if you have 3 people or you have 5 people, if one turn takes 1 turn, then it doesn't really matter. Who would you recommend this game for?
Dungeons and Dragons. Satan's game.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Beowulf answered something I was going to say. I think this game would appeal to folks who prefer board games over RPGs. I don't think that's necessarily true. I do think that it appeals to people who enjoy the challenge of a game for its own sake, right? There's a game here, and it demands to be played. It's not just, for a lot of people, the game part of the role-playing game, right, is just a thin veneer so that you can role-play in character, right? That is not what this game is. In fact, some people, right, like very famously, was it Brennan Lee Mulligan was like, I don't need rules for anything but combat because me and my friends can just make it up, We don't want rules to get in the way of what we really came here to do, which is to act and role play in character. This is not the game for them, right? So if you're like super drama kids and all you want to do is talk in character and do whatever you want, then this is not the game for you. On the other hand, if you enjoy the idea of role-playing games as a discipline unto themselves, then I think that this game could appeal to you. So what do I mean by that? So let's take a look at an example character. I think there's some in this book. Yes. All right. Here is Varg. Okay. Let's go over to the PDF. Here is Varg, the human magician. Okay. And kind of ignore everything else here. But we can see that he has two traits, thoughtful and wizard's sight. And these are pretty vague. I mean, like the description of them is, pretty nominal, right? But this game, when we make checks, we're going to fail some of these checks. When the grind happens, we are going to acquire conditions, right? Like it's gonna happen. We are gonna acquire conditions. And to relieve those conditions, we need checks in camp. And we can't get checks except by using our traits, thoughtful and wizard sight, against ourselves. And I think there is a fun, I'll call it, people talk about combat, okay, in D&D, but particularly like in Pathfinder 2 or stuff like that. They talk about combat as a puzzle, right? Like it's a game within the game to be played. In my personal opinion, Torchbearer belongs to that group of games which makes role-playing the game, right? This is a role-playing puzzle. What do you do? How do you use these traits against yourself in order to acquire checks? How do you use these traits to help you when you really need to pass a test? And how does the game's outcomes affect and shape your belief, your goal, your creed, and your instinct, which is what you need to do in order to advance in the game? Let me give you an example. Do they have, I think it's on the character sheet here. Hold a sec, let me pull up the character sheet, which I do not have open. Okay. All right. So here's the character sheet. Okay. And we can see here on the level requirement, right? In order to level up, in order to get to level 2, we need to have spent 3 fate points and 3 persona points. Great. Easy. All right. Now, we know that we can earn fate points by playing into our belief. See, uphold your belief and your actions and earn a fate point, right? But we also know that we can earn a persona point if we challenge our belief, if we act against our belief. Now, imagine at the start of the session, you take a look and you say, oh, wow, I've spent like 5 fate. Okay. I've spent like 6 fate. So I have more than enough past the 3 requirement for level 2. In fact, I've almost spent 7 fate. It's like, well, how did I get all that fate? Well, I've really been playing into my belief. Okay, but I haven't earned, I'm pretty low on persona. I need to earn persona points so that I can spend them so that I can level up to 2 and eventually to 3. Okay, well, how do I earn persona points? Well, one of the ways is by being the MVP of the session. One of the ways is by being a team worker or the team helper, and maybe I work for that. But another way I can earn a persona point that doesn't require the group's approving or voting of me is I could play against my belief. Now, mechanically, as a player, I want to level up. But the game is going, hey, you've been really playing into your beliefs, but we also want to see you, right? It's almost like the director going to the actor. We also want to see you struggle with your beliefs. We want to see you maybe have some problems with them or question them or challenge them. And you go, oh, okay. So this session, I'm going to look for opportunities to play against my belief. And that it's a role-playing challenge. It's a role-playing puzzle. I want my character to play against their belief. How do I make that happen? How do I find the right opportunity for that it makes sense in the fiction? And how do I tell the story of this character and their evolving dynamic personality? Because I want a persona point, because I want to level up. Also because I want a persona point because they're powerful and cool. So this is what I mean by a role-playing challenge, right? And so, this isn't a question of, the motivation for your character is kind of being externally prompted. But the challenge to you, the player, is how do I make that come to life? How do I make that happen? How do I make that make sense? How do I make that, I'm looking for an opportunity in, the context of this. Like, let me give you a great example. I think one of the example characters in the book filled out is the dwarf. Okay. And the dwarf's belief is there's nothing in this world but gold and treasure, right? Earned and spent, I think is what their belief is, right? There's nothing more important than gold and treasure, earning it and spending it, right? That's his belief. And you can easily imagine playing into that belief, and each session, you're going to be cranking up a bunch of fate points. But then the dwarf player realizes, I need some persona points. It's been a couple sessions. I'm a little low on persona points. How can I earn persona points? I could work against my belief. Okay, well, what would that look like? And then you're looking for an opportunity, and maybe there's a moment where there's an opportunity to grab a sack of treasure. And instead, you make a big deal about it where, you describe your character looking at the treasure and then looking back over at your buddy. Now, a couple of sessions ago, your buddy was just some stranger from town that agreed to accompany you to this godforsaken place. But now you've adventured with them for the past couple of weeks, and there's something new stirs in the dwarf's chest. Something he hasn't felt in a long time, a bond of friendship. And in that moment, your character turns from the treasure and goes and helps their ally, and at the end of the session, you say, hey, look, my character's becoming more nuanced. What is my character becoming? You guessed it, becoming more like a hero, right? Like the idea is that there's this growth arc that the game mechanically encourages by making you have to go get these points. And the way you get these points is by doing stuff like challenging your beliefs and changing your beliefs, making your characters more three-dimensional and making your character. And now, of course, my character might keep his belief. And afterwards, after I save the wizard's scrawny ass, the dwarf goes, and don't think that's not going to cost you. Next time we're in town, my bar tab's on you, because he's still kind of like, even maybe the dwarf is internally struggling with, why did I just save this human wizard instead of going and getting the treasure? I myself don't fully understand what just happened, right? Now that is all being externally motivated by the player, and it's being externally motivated by the game system, which has these codified things like belief, creed, goal, and instinct, and because of the leveling up system of fate and persona. And now, if we look back at original Dungeons and Dragons, basic Dungeons and Dragons, basic Dungeons and Dragons used the same idea, right? The way you got experience points was primarily by taking treasure out of the dungeon and bringing it back to town. Each GP, a value of treasure, each GP was worth 1 XP. You also got some experience points for killing monsters. So that meant the game was basically saying you are encouraged to go find the biggest treasures. You're encouraged to kill monsters potentially, but that's also very dangerous. If you could just get treasure, that's even better. And that is what that game was rewarding. Did it reward or care about how you role played your character? Could I play a 1982 basic D&D and write down on my character sheet belief and creed and goal and instinct? Of course I could, right? And in some ways you might say that these are the same things as bonds and flaws and ideals are from a 5e character sheet, right? But the point is, if I write that down on my 5e character sheet, or I write it down on my 1982 basic character sheet, the fact remains, I don't have to. You know, in basic D&D, you don't get any benefit. There's no reason for you to do it other than this is just how I want to play my character, which is totally fine. But realize that you're playing a different game. This game is about role-playing characters, right? And the challenge to you as a player is, how do you make this character, you know, come to life in the context of what the game's mechanics are encouraging or forcing you to do. And, you know, old versions of D&D had nothing. 5e tried to give you this little bit of a carrot. You know, it said, hey, look, if you role play your character's flaw or bond, you get an inspiration. Torchbearer uses a stick and a carrot. Torchbearer says, look, fate points and persona points are sweet. When you spend them, you can explode your 6s. You can re-roll all your failures. They're awesome. You want to get them. Stick, or carrot. But they're also kind of a stick because they're like, hey, if you don't role play your character's beliefs or creeds or goals or instincts, you're not going to level up. And not only do you have to play to them, you have to play against them. Right. So, look, consider this, right? Okay. If you work, remember, you can't earn the same reward twice in a session. Goal. If you accomplish your goal, you'll earn a persona point. If you work towards your goal but don't accomplish it, you earn a fate point. So imagine when you're setting your goal at the beginning of the session, part of the reason you're setting your goal is you're kind of telling yourself, is this a goal that I think I can actually achieve this session? You're like, I really need a persona point. I better set my goal to be something that seems very achievable this session. On the other hand, if you really need a fate point, then you might set your character's goal to be something that they are unlikely to achieve this session, but it is something that you can make concrete forward progress for, because that is a requirement. And that way, by working towards your goal but not achieving it, your character will earn a fate point at the end of the session. Whereas if you achieve your goal, you'll earn a persona point. So again, this is the game's mechanics forcing you, the player, to think about, how am I going to build my character, you know, the matrix of their personality, the natures of their internal challenges, the actual arc of their character's growth. But it's all being motivated by the game itself. So now, who's that for? I don't know. You know, that was the original question. I don't know. You know, how would I rank Torchbearer on the GNS scale? I think it kind of defies the GNS scale a little bit. It's not very simulationist, but there's some elements that are more I'm going to say it's not very simulationist. So that is definitely true. It doesn't have meta currency. I mean, it's got fate and persona, but they're not like fate points where it's like, you know, rewrite history or anything like that. None of that exists in this game, you know, where you can just like, I spend a fate point to say, oh, this guy's my cousin, or, you know, oh, there's actually a secret pile of explosives over here. But the whole game itself is pushing you towards creating stories and role playing. So it's interesting. I don't know. You know, and I would even say, I would actually even say something a little bit different. Torchbearer And Burning Wheel. Yeah. So Dungeon World, Powered by the Apocalypse games, Root, Avatar. Actually, Avatar might be a little bit different to this too, but we'll say Dungeon World, Root. The rules of those Powered by the Apocalypse games are really, and Fate and maybe Cortex, I think, are really interested in using their mechanics to tell a story, right? To create a narrative, a satisfying narrative, right? Like the kind that we would see in a movie or a book or whatever. This game, I don't think Torchbearer cares about creating a narrative. What Torchbearer cares about is creating interesting characters. Torchbearer is really character focused. Torchbearer is very, it doesn't really care about the actual progression of the story. It's not interested in a satisfying 3-arc plot, of rising action and then climax and then denouement, as some RPGs are. What it's really interested in is digging into your character. What does your character believe? What are they fighting for? Why are they doing this? And what struggles and what costs and what prices are you willing to pay and will you bear in order to achieve those goals or to uphold those beliefs? And it almost doesn't really care about in fact, all of these games, Burning Wheel, Mouse Guard, Torchbearer, are all in that same space. Mouse Guard, right? Very famously, the motto of the Mouse Guard, right, which is carved into the stone in Lockhaven, says it matters not what you fight, but what you fight for. Like Mouse Guard, the motto of it, which is in the world, but fundamentally the whole game is basically saying, we don't care what you're doing. It doesn't matter why you're fighting. And you're going to fight some king. Oh, you're going to fight some dragon. We don't actually care about that. What we care about is what are you fighting for? What do you believe in? What will you pay? What lines will you cross? What lines won't you cross? Right? And we want to see your character struggle with these questions. And all of us, GM and fellow players, are legitimately interested in what are those answers? Who will your character be? Who will your character become? And so it's less worried about the story and the world and the, outside political motivations and stuff like that. And it's more interested in why are you doing this? And what do you believe in? And what are you fighting for? And I think that's what the game seeks to explore and seeks to dig into. So I don't know. Maybe it appeals to GMs who've run every system under the sun. Burning Wheel, of which this is sort of Burning Wheel Light, is held up, right, as like this ur-text of kind of like the ultimate RPG, but it's kind of like some people view it as being like unattainable and unplayable, even if they've never played it, it's just such this like lofty goal. It's like theoretical physics, it might be right, mathematically on paper, but you'll never be able to prove it in a lab, that kind of thing. To be honest, I'd be willing to play this if I knew there was a GM that wanted to run it, but I'm weird. It appeals to weird people. I'm not going to sure, I'd run this if everyone read the core rule book beforehand. Yeah, Keith. I definitely think there's number one, Keith, I think players should be aware of how the game operates in all cases of role-playing games. But this is not I don't think this is a quick, easy teach. Hey, you sit down, you've never played the game before, let's go. That being said, character creation is pretty simple. There's not a lot of choices to make. And in some ways, there's kind of a learn by fire kind of approach to this, which I kind of like, maybe part of the fun of it is, getting burned a few times, not like in a DCC funnel way, because again, this isn't a game where it's like your character is just going to randomly and immediately die. But like, do you really need to know about the rules for, being able to grit your teeth on an injury? Not until you're injured, right? And then once my character becomes injured, then the GM can be like, hey, your character's injured. one of the options available to you if you want is you can grit your teeth and basically tough out the wound. But if you do that, I get to knock down one of your skills or one of your attributes. And it's like, do you want to do that? And they're like, I don't know. And like you kind of introduce them to the game mechanics, the Faustian game mechanics, right? One Faustian deal at a time, right? And I think that is that's kind of interesting, right? To a certain extent. I don't know how much everybody agrees with that, but I do think it's pretty simple in that respect. Let's see here. Thaddeus says, I agree. The players need to be well read on the rules to have a grasp on how to utilize all the levers the game provides. Yes. I mean, but I think remember, they even say in this game, this is not a game to be played for one session, 2 sessions. On Thursday, I ranted about why I think a lot of people do a disservice to themselves by learning how to play a game at like a convention and going and playing a one shot. You can't learn a game in many games in one session. You need to spend time with them. And I think that there's an element here of learning all of the things. Like, for example, to play chess, you do need to learn how all the pieces move, right? Like, okay, we can agree on that. But you don't necessarily have to like study chess opening theory and all this other stuff in order to play a game of chess. You're going to learn more about the nature of chess as you start playing with it, and you'll start to sort of develop an intuition for these ideas as you go through it. Thaddeus says, I'm just more and more interested in playing this. Look, I might be overselling it. I might be hyping it up. I mean, it's funny. People always say, Derek's such a pessimist. And it's like, no, I just like what I like and I don't like what I don't like. I mean, that's all. I will get this book eventually. My group wants to basically play every Free League game first. Free League games are great. I've got more than a few on my shelf. I've got Forbidden Lands. I've got Dragonbane. I've got Symbaroum. I've got Vaesen. I think that's it. Oh, I have the One Ring. Lugs. Even though you explained this game quite a few times, I still don't get it. Not sure why. Why play Torchbearer over something like OSE, Dragonbane, or similar games? Because I don't think they're anything like OSE or Dragonbane is the answer. OSE and Dragonbane are rulings over rules. This game is rules over rulings. So, I mean, in that respect, it is literally the polar opposite. This game wants the rules to get involved. This game wants the rules to be front and center. This game deliberately puts restrictions on what you can and can't do, because through those rules and through the adherence to the procedure, that's how the game generates these tough choices and weird outcomes and difficult situations that the game thrives on, by putting your characters into situations where now they have to see, what their words are worth. Now they have to see what they believe in. So in that respect, Lugs, I mean, on the most basic of premises is it is literally the polar opposite. Dragonbane and Old School Essentials and Shadow Dark are very much rulings over rules. This is not that. This is rules over ruling. Vintage Zebra says, I'm hoping that my group will move away from Pathfinder First Edition. Oh, he's still playing that one. For some more role-play leaning games. This sounds like it has the right amount of crunch to satisfy our system masters and our role players. That might be an interesting, group dynamic. Like if a lot of role-play narrative games, right? Like when people think of role-play narrative games, they think of games like Fate. They think of games like Fate, or they think of games like Ryutama, which, admittedly, there's not a lot of crunch here. There's not a lot of system mastery. There's not a lot of strategy and tactical play. Torchbearer has that, but it is designed to fundamentally all focus in on your characters, what you fight for. Right big and front and center on your character sheet. Carsey says, I can confirm my Torchbearer campaign was meandering while featuring the best characters in any of my campaigns. That's how the teaching goes, one thing at a time, and slowly the wheel reveals itself. He said like a true disciple of Crane, Carsey. I would only introduce the game to RPG veterans and have them read the rules beforehand and go further. This is not a game for new people. Absolutely. I would never. No. This is for RPG veterans who I think I have found that there are, this is a broad generalization, but there are people who play role-playing games and they're really interested in the games and they're not really interested in the role-playing and they view it as kind of cringe or unnecessary. And there are plenty of examples all over the world and the internet of groups that are playing D&D or Pathfinder this very night who are playing the game. It's a role-playing game, but there is no role-playing going on. And they're having great time. Now, arguably, are they role-playing? Sure, because, the act of playing the game is role-playing. But they are not, doing any sort of character examination. They are not doing any sort of personality evaluation. Maybe a little bit of, people might occasionally talk in character, maybe not. But there's a lot of people who just play the game, go through the adventure, and get the story. That's all fine. And that's fine. There's a lot of people who do that. Then there are a lot of people who could care less about the game, and they just want to role-play. The people who are very excited, like, oh my God, we had one of the most amazing sessions last night. I don't even think we rolled the dice. We were all just role playing, we were just all role playing. And there are people for whom they really like that game. Strangely, by the way, both of these groups of people are playing role playing games, even though they're literally doing completely different things. Torchbearer is for neither of these groups. Torchbearer is the Venn diagram of those two groups. Torchbearer is for the people who want a game that matters, but also want to examine their character and want to role play, and they want to change and grow and develop this character just through the interaction with the rules and the mechanics, not based off of their own internal heuristic or internalized belief of who this character is and what this character would do. The easiest way to sort of put that into comparison is your character could make a check, fail the check. Let me give you a better example. I didn't even give you the example. Let's say Keith, is going to make a hunter check, right? To go, hunt down prey. Maybe Keith's a pretty good hunter. Keith's character has a 3 or 4 in hunter. Okay. And then Carsey says, hey, I've got hunter, I can help you. And, we say, okay, sure. Carsey's not as good of a hunter. So Keith's going to go hunt. Now, Keith goes and hunts and gets +1 die from Carsey. And Keith fails the roll. But I decide that he succeeds. He does manage to hunt down the prey. But it takes a lot longer than he thought. And it's, well past sundown before he returns with the deer. And I give Keith's character the exhausted condition. Now for Carsey, who is helping Keith, I give them the angry condition. And I basically tell them, I get to sort of take over their character for a moment. I say, you are so pissed off. This was supposed to only take the morning. You've been out all day. You didn't get to do any of the things that you wanted to do in camp. You're tired, you're wet, and he was being an idiot and wasn't listening to you and was just ignoring you the whole time. And you're pissed off. And now I kind of return control back to Carsey, but Carsey has the angry condition now. And now Carsey mechanically can't benefit from wises or beneficial traits, but Carsey is also now angry. Their PC is now angry. And that's on them to play it. And I got to decide that. Well, I didn't get to decide that. The game got to decide that because the roll failed and because Carsey put themselves in that situation to help Keith. And now Keith has their exhausted. And sure, they got their success, but at what cost? Success with a cost. And now they've got these additional conditions, and the conditions just keep ranking up and ranking up. And the conditions make it harder and harder for you to succeed and get ahead, which is one of the things that you want to do. But remember, this game is a triangle. It's a triumvirate. It's about managing your resources while also examining your character, but also trying to succeed. There's an underlying premise here of, you want your characters to level up and grow and become powerful heroes, right? But how do you do that while still struggling with your character's beliefs and goals? And how do you do that while staying the fuck alive, right? And nobody said it was easy. And it's that struggle that defines us, right? It's through the challenge. It's through the impossible task that we, get to see what our characters are made of and truly find the depth of their mettle. Also, yes, Spring Attack was very powerful, for sure. But in 3rd edition in Pathfinder 1. So Torchbearer is like Pathfinder 2nd edition in that you're playing the game specifically for the rules. The system is the main attraction rather than just being a generic fantasy TTRPG. It is absolutely not a generic fantasy TTRPG. Yes, you are playing it for the rules, and you are playing it for what those rules produce and what those rules, what kind of play pattern and play experience that those rules create. Yeah. Awesome. Well, it is midnight. Look at that. We went for 3 hours. I didn't think we would. You guys are awesome, by the way. I love it. Saturday night, it's midnight. It's we got 40 viewers watching me rant and rave about God knows what. But hey, you know, if you're from the other side of the world, good Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon, depending on where you're at. If you're from the West Coast, good evening to you. And if you're like me on the East Coast, welcome to Sunday. We can hang out for a bit. I mean, we got 40 people here. I mean, if anybody has any thoughts, comments, questions, something they want to hear me rant about or whatever, I mean, I'm down for it. We could talk more about Torchbearer. Or we could talk about, well, damn near anything, really. You know me. I'm good for it. But if not, you know, well, I'll call that good. I mean, we didn't get through conflicts. Conflicts are admittedly a little bit more complex than I want to get into right now, but it is a nice situation. Whew. We've been given so the price of Torchbearer, the player's guide is $25 and the GM guide is $25. And I think it comes in a $50 box set for both games. Yes. That is the price of Torchbearer. Yeah, Carsey, that's a great example. Yes, what's magical about Torchbearer is that if you play it optimally, like a power gamer, that you'll be role playing your heart out. All right. Right. You know, that's absolutely true. Yeah, it's I don't know burning. I don't know what land. I don't know what Luke Crane does. All of their books are insanely priced, like so low. And I mean, they are nice. I mean, look at this book. It's got the gold banding. It's got a ribbon. It's well made. It's stitch bound. It's this nice hard, you know, it's crazy. And they sell these things for a crazy price. It's crazy. Have I talked about 7th Sea before? I believe we have. Yep. Copy link address. There you go. That link will take you to my first look at 7th Sea, 2nd edition. So that's basically where I open up the book for the first time. I've never really read it before. Obviously I know a little bit about 7th Sea. It's been around for a long time. But it's me basically, where the hell's my 7th Sea book? It's basically me going into my 7th Sea book and experiencing it. Oh, there it is. It's me going into this book and exploring it and kind of reacting to it and learning the rules and kind of getting my first hot take of what the rules are and what they're doing here. What systems would you suggest for a duo game? Looking for something to play with my wife. Would Forbidden Lands work for this? I don't think Forbidden Lands would. Forbidden Lands, you kind of need a party because you need a couple different people to fulfill in the gaps to work for that. What is a good game with one-on-one playing? That's a great question. I mean, Forbidden Lands is better than most of your standard class D&D type games, so I will say that, but I think you lose a lot of the fun of the experience with that. I mean, you could obviously play like the solo games that are designed for solo players, but you could play it with a GM. So like Starforged, Ironsworn, what's the other one called? Anyways, I would look at that. I mean, those are designed for solo play. So, but a lot of the games that are designed for solo play can also kind of be played in a co-op or GM mode. And intuitively, the game is sort of based around the fact that there's only going to be one of you. So it's not a bad option. It should have been 29 or 2 for 50. Yes, well. I will say I've learned so much from reading through Torchbearer, Mouseguard, and Burning Wheel, and I'm 100% mining these games for mechanics. I'm just not really sold on Torchbearer or Burning Wheel as a whole. I really do want to play Mouseguard, though. Well, yeah, I mean, Mouseguard kind of works the same way. But yeah, I mean, it's not for everybody. There's nothing wrong with you if these mechanics and these restrictions, let's call them what they are. They're restrictions. They are rules-based restrictions. And when people come to role-playing games because they want to have the freedom, right? So some people come to role-playing games for freedom. Some people come to role-playing games for freedom to explore a character and act however I want, and I get to decide how they feel, and I get to decide what they say, and I get to decide what this character cares about, and I get to decide how they react to every situation, right? I get to completely be in control. So there are some people who come to role-playing games for that. There are also people who come to role-playing games because they want freedom from mechanics, right? I love old school games because it's rulings over rules. I can do whatever I want. It's not just what's on my character sheet. I can just make some crazy shit up and the GM has to go with it. And I love the creativity and the puzzle solving and the problem solving. And there's a little bit of, GM pixel pitching and GM mother may I, but I love, trying to swindle my way into the GM agreeing with my crazy half-cocked plan. And I love reading the room and getting, whatever. So there are people who really enjoy that. And those people really enjoy old school games or games that have a more relaxed rule structure. There are even people who play games that have a very tight rule structure, like Pathfinder 2, and they play them as one or the other of those two things, right? Because they can kind of just ignore the rules because the rules aren't important. What's important is what you care about. Torchbearer is not those things. And so Torchbearer is saying, no, this game is this. If you do something different, you are not playing this game. Go play a different game. I mean, this game, in the opening pages of that book, it told you, hey, if you want to play something different, go play one of our games made by one of our friends. They make awesome games. You should go play them, but don't play this game. This game is for this, and it is not something to be thrown away or cascaded at your whim. If you're going to play our game, play it fucking right. That's kind of what they're saying. And that's not a message that everybody wants to hear, It's Vintage Zebra. I don't know why I keep calling you that. Says, have you ever done a stream in the past on how to introduce new games to your group? And I believe we have. Geez, I don't remember what stream it was, but I was trying to Google it really quickly. We did do a stream about getting your group to try new stuff. I just don't remember what it is. Keith, Derek, did Patreon suggest Torchbearer? No, not really. No, Keith, this has been my personal interest for a while. It's just been sort of something that's been bubbling up. And the joke, Keith, was that I had bought second edition Torchbearer because again, I own the first edition from way back in the day, from like 10 years ago when this first came out or whatever. When did this come out? This came out 2013, so 11 years ago. And I got a chance to play it a couple of times, and it just and to be fair, there are elements in this game that fundamentally changed the way that people like me and Smith played even D&D games. When Beowulfs talk about stealing stuff from it and putting it into their games, that's totally fine. Like Smith and I basically love the idea of the camp phase. We love the idea of the heroes going on the adventure in the dungeon or the ruin or the dangerous, but then having a place where they can go back to and sort of, regain some of their resources and try to do things. And this idea of this kind of like back and forth. And anyways, it was a big part of a lot of Smith's campaigns as well. Smith did a 5e game called Darkest Dungeons or Deep Dungeons. It was basically a 5e homage to Darkest Dungeon, the video game, and Torchbearer. Anyways, so But so this is a game that I've always been sort of obsessed with. But I bought the second edition box set like a couple years ago, and I never opened it. It's just been sitting in a box, and I just recently unboxed it just for fun, because it's been sort of one of those things that we've been joking about in the Patreon for a long time. When will Derek unbox his Torchbearer books? And then I was just reading through them, and I was like, man, I just remember how much I love this game, and it just started, kind of spiraling from there. Oh yeah, there's a one-on-one Dragonbane solo adventure. Yeah, that's also a good point, Keith. Jackal, to what extent do you think the experience of Torchbearer would be affected by playing it online instead of in person? Okay, I'm going to go out on a limb here. And I'm going to say that I think Torchbearer is maybe better and easier to play online. Okay, let me rephrase it. Obviously, playing it in person is the best. But what I'm saying is I think it's better and easier to play Torchbearer online than maybe a traditional Pathfinder 2 D&D type game, because the game is so procedural, right? Like you move through these phases, and it's like, okay, this turn, what are we doing? And there's a character, there's a player who is the leader. They are the person who is going to basically say, I'm going to be the one who basically tells the GM, like, this is what we're doing. Now they're going to talk, they're going to discuss. It's like a Zoom call, but like there's this built-in idea of the game of we're going to strategize and we're going to talk, and then we're going to do this one thing. And every player is sort of bound into that one action, even if it's only one character that's taking the action. And so I think it kind of focuses the gameplay down to these individual ticks of action, which I think is very beneficial. And so I think to that end, it benefits from it very strongly. Additionally, the game is obviously completely theater of the mind. There's not even a map, right? In fact, the game says do not map. The map is virtual, right? Like you have to make you have to write down like, oh, there's the room with the weird face. There's the room with the glowing orbs where, the one is red and the one is blue or whatever. And then you have to make a check in the game. You have to spend one of your actions to try to convert that into a map that you can use then to fast travel. So it's like a virtual map. So it's very designed in that way for that, kind of, I think, online play. Additionally, the game talks about all these player aids, which I own because I'm extra. But there's like the player deck that has all the different little cards that you need. Well, playing that in person, that's a lot of extra baggage. But when you play it online, you don't need that. It's just an image on a file. You can just flip the card back and forth. Use Foundry's deck or Roll20's deck or whatever, as well. Lugs wants to know, is Mouse Guard basically Redwall the game? The answer is yes. So the answer is yes. I mean, I'll say it's a little bit more, mature than Redwall, but I mean, like the art of Mouse Guard is anthropomorphic little mice running around with, swords and going on adventures and, being little adventurous mice doing adventurous mouse things. And that is basically Mouse Guard. So it is basically Redwall, the game. Yes. Redwall series was my childhood. Yeah, I was a big fan of that. I'm more first of what you mentioned as player, Derek, but I'm down to get into rigid systems. That's fair. Yeah, look, there's all sorts of, one of the reasons why there's so many different types of role-playing games and why it's so hard to put a definition on it. Why someone could say, think about how many people out there go, you're like, what is your number one hobby? And they go, I love role-playing games. And you could sit, you might ask 5 people and they all say the same things. I'm so passionate about role-playing games. And you sit down to play a game with them and every person has a very different expectation and definition of what's going to happen at that session, right? For some people, playing a role-playing games means sitting around a 5-foot square grid, a 1-inch square grid, and talking about, what, actions, economy they're taking and what feats they're going to use. And they are not wrong. They're role-playing. They're playing a role-playing game. They're playing the role of their character in that fight. And, they want the turn-based initiative and they don't care about the 1 hour time in the combat. Then you have other people who's like, I don't even need a character sheet and I'm playing a role-playing game, So, it's a very wide spectrum that this hobby has. Yeah, beautiful quality. They do a great job with the quality of the books. I hope someday you'll make a video for the Degenesis game line. The books are absolutely gorgeous and completely free to play. Okay. Yes, I mean, I like the toys. I'm not going to lie. I like the toys. I like little I've talked about this before. I like little gems, and I like little poker chips, and I like, I like physical ephemera, as they would say. Let's see here. I've watched a lot of your stuff, so I'll look up the video you mentioned. Your channel is on a whole other higher plane than other TTRPG YouTubes. Such valuable analysis. Thank you. Well, Vintage, that's very nice for you to say. Thank you so much. I've been doing this for a long time, and I've been talking about RPGs long before I ever had a YouTube channel. So it's just nice that some people, and obviously I have some haters, some people don't really like my thought process or the way that I run games or my philosophy towards games. And that's okay. That's why there's other channels out there that, quite frankly, are much bigger than me because their message is more palatable and mine isn't as palatable. I feel bad though that I couldn't find that video. I you'd think I would have an encyclopedic knowledge of all of my things. I'm opening up my my YouTube studio to actually look through my own live streams. But as I did so, I saw a recommended video from Xiaoma. Does anyone watch Xiaoma or like Oriental Pearl? You ever see those people who like speak a trillion different languages and they go around and talk to people and watch them get blown away that they're speaking in their language? That is so cool. So real quick here, for Lugs, this is a link to a Mouse Guard deep dive that we did where we talked about, Mouse Guard on a very deep level. And then here we go. Okay, I found it. Okay, found it. Here we go. And then for the person who asked, I think it was Vintage. So this link, no, these are my studio links. Ignore those links. Okay, hold on a sec. Ignore that. Delete. There we go. All right. There we go. That link will take you to New RPG Who Dis. So the first link was for Jackal. Damn, see, Jackal knew. The video is titled New Game Who Dis. Yes. So that new RPG Who Dis is our live stream that we did on thing. In fact, actually, here we go. We can see here somebody did a content for this one, so actually it's chapters. So we have a discussion, opt-in, new game is a palate cleanser, don't be afraid to exclude players, choose the right game, ask players to learn about the game, consider games with amazing intros, use visual aids or other player resources, no alcohol, pre-gens, no session zero, simplify the rules, don't look things up, focus on fun and storytelling, encourage conversations and question asking, be patient and positive, and then some wrap up. So yeah. Anyways. Let's see here. GM Scott says, "Yeah, I love those." Okay, yeah, I absolutely love them. I'm subscribed to a bunch of them. Oh yeah, that's Xiaoma. Yeah, that's Ari from New York. But yeah, he speaks Mandarin. He speaks Fujianese. He speaks Cantonese. He speaks a bunch of other languages. But if you like Xiaoma, check out Oriental Pearl. She's very good. She speaks like fluent Japanese, Mandarin, and Korean, and she's crazy. She's good. But yeah, when he speaks like one of the sub dialects that, and watching those people like lose their minds, it's like so cool. It's one of those things where it's like, I've never really been that good at languages, and I'm just so jealous of people that are. That Torchbearer Game Master set looks incredible. It comes with so much stuff, and it's a steal even at $160. It sure is. You get 3 books, and you get all the cards, and you get a GM screen, and you get all these like little coins and all these little like counters and markers that have like a lot of like like game coins or whatever that you're supposed to use. It's pretty cool. It's good stuff. Alrighty. Well, that I think is going to do it. Thanks everybody for hanging out on this. It was fun. It was a nice way to spend my my Saturday night. I'm appreciative of everybody hanging out here tonight with me. That was very kind of you. Glad we got to talk and get into some stuff. Shout out to Happy Goldfish, Self-Confessed Cynic, for the super chats tonight. That was very nice of you. To all my amazing and incredible patrons and channel supporters and subscribers, thank you so much. And I'm glad that you were all able to hang out with me on this little bonus stream here, and we were able to spend a Saturday night or Sunday morning, depending on where you are, hanging out together. So thanks, everybody. I'll see you next week. Nice last call. Peace.